Tales of the Reincarnated Lord. Chapter 576 Suggestion to Demilitarize. It was a sunny day at the beach. Loris lied down lazily under a shade made of fine, grey linen cloth. He watched as his wife and children played by the seaside. This is the life. Loris breathed a long sigh and tried to forget everything unhappy and troubling that occurred in the imperial capital. Kenmaze came over with a small wooden bucket. Within it was ice made from saltpeter and 2 bottles of chilled fruit wine. After taking a seat beside Loris, he took out 2 glasses from the bucket and opened one bottle. The amber-colored wine looked ever so mesmerizing through the transparent glass. He gave 1 glass to Loris before taking a swig from his own. "I really don't know how you always come up with these little ideas. You were actually able to make ice during a hot summer like this. Being able to enjoy chilled fruit wine during such weather is truly a luxury." Loris didn't speak and finished the wine in his glass before filling it halfway and popping 2 ice chunks into his glass. It was currently the beginning of the 9th month. After participating in the ceremony held in the imperial capital, they parted with Auguslo during the night banquet on unfriendly terms because of another argument. Loris, Kenmaze, Shazan, and Philim left the imperial capital with their guards early the next morning without bidding their farewell to go to Silaoaz and reunite with their families. They were at a beach near Seaview Manor. Compared to House Kenmaze's Platinum Beach, this one was far smaller, but it was more than enough for the dukes and their families to have fun. Looking at the people playing about, Kenmaze breathed a deep sigh. He had spent lots of money to invest in Platinum Beach to make it the best vacation spot in the kingdom and was going to go there every summer with lots of other nobles. But Auguslo came over and brought the nobles to war. After the 3 bloody years, all the nobles suffered heavy losses and were no longer in the mood to spend their vacation at Platinum Beach. They were busy licking each other's wounds at home. "Don't worry. Just invite the nobles to go to Platinum Beach next year. It's been 5 years already and I bet they must have forgotten about it by now. The empire has already been restored and there shouldn't be any wars in the foreseeable future, so I believe that they'll regain the mood to have fun once their wallets fatten up again." Loris knew what Kenmaze was mulling over when he saw him gaze blankly at the beach. "Ah, it's not that." Kenmaze snapped out of his stupor and said, "I'm not worried about that. I was wondering what His Majesty meant when he suggested us to demilitarize during the banquet that night." After the grand ceremony, Auguslo held a large banquet and invited all the nobles of the empire and their family members there. Even though some rather sour things happened before the ceremony, thanks to Auguslo's efforts, the ceremony was wrapped up properly in the end. Satisfied with how everything went down, Auguslo announced the policies he would be implementing across the next 3 years. Not only would he turn his focus on the life of the people and increase the income of the empire to fill its treasury, he also encouraged the development of trade and mineable resources as well as a decrease in scale of the military. Focus was placed on the last part. Auguslo believed that since the empire had been restored, he would bring back the 3-army policy used back in imperial days. The Royal Army would defend the imperial capital, Wittelian Legion would deal with external threats, and Fierce-Gale Legion would deal with bandits and other threats within the empire. Additionally, territories under imperial family rule would form their own garrison forces. Auguslo was also planning to rebuild the Order of Imperial Knights and recruit talented descendants of nobles to serve the empire. Those were mostly policies that existed since the old days of the empire and nobody minded them. The Royal Army, Wittelian Legion, and Fierce-Gale Legion were the 3 main legions of the former empire that were under direct imperial control. As long as Auguslo was capable of rebuilding them, nobody would have anything to say about it. As for the Order of Imperial Knights, it offered a career path for the noble descendants who wouldn't be inheriting the household and helped prevent strife during a time of peace. Those descendants wouldn't be allowed to join their household forces to prevent them posing a threat to the legitimate heirs. For instance, Loris' second uncle who died on the battlefield served as the sergeant colonel in the Chrisan Imperial Knight Order. What the nobles didn't expect was that after announcing the military policies of the empire, Auguslo suggested the nobles to scale down on their own forces. He reasoned that since peace was upon them, the nobles of the empire shouldn't continue to expand their household forces and instead invest their funds in development. So, he suggested for each noble house to demilitarize to a limited degree and adhere to the limits and standards he would set. Auguslo believed that an imperial baron could have around 200 or 300 man squads in the household forces, a viscount could have around 500 men, a count could have around 1,000, and a marquis 3,000 at most. As for dukes, they could form a division of troops or a small legion. For instance, a large legion of 45,000 men should be shrinked into having only 4 6,000 strong divisions and another logistics unit of 1,000 men, making the total number of men in a legion around 25,000 people. Auguslo emphasized that he made the suggestions for the sakes of the nobles' own wealth. Maintaining a large force during peacetime wasn't only a waste, it was a huge burden. He believed that they should decrease military spending so that the nobles can continue to enjoy lives of luxury and develop their dominions properly. As for bandits and the like, the empire's fierce-scale legion would take care of it after it was formed and the nobles didn't have to worry about it. Auguslo expressed with great grief that the nobles of the empire had suffered enough losses during the bloody 3 years on Phalic Plains, so his plan to help the nobles decrease their military spending was a boon from the empire to the nobles. In the future, all military deployments would be taken care of by the 3 imperial legions and all the nobles had to do was defend their dominions well. Unless the empire was in danger of being wiped out completely, Auguslo wouldn't call for the nobles to take up arms and send them to the battlefield. As for conflicts between nobles themselves, Auguslo expressed that he didn't wish to see wars break out between noble houses and encouraged the settlement of issues in a noble court. Interdomain wars were not beneficial for anybody involved after all. Regardless of who the victor was, the 3 imperial legions could step in between those wars and eliminate conflicts so that the noble court could give its verdict on the conflict. Everyone participating in the banquet turned their eyes to Lorist, Fisibelan, Kenmays, Felim and Chazan. They knew that House Norton's forces had already exceeded the forces commanded by Auguslo in terms of might. Even if he managed to form the 3 imperial legions, he would find it hard-pressed to fight House Norton. If the other dukes of the allied houses joined forces together, they could easily sweep through the empire. Even if Fisibelan joined forces with Auguslo and all the other nobles in the empire, they wouldn't be able to stop the joint forces of the 4 allied houses. It was quite apparent that Auguslo was intentionally bringing the demilitarization plan out to deal with the 4 allied houses. To the other landed nobles, the plan didn't affect them much. Even Handra, Forand, and Shabaj were in agreement with that plan. As Auguslo had said, the decrease in the scale of household forces would decrease the burden they had to bear to maintain them. Even if they received a call to arms from Auguslo, they wouldn't have to send as many men to help out. Perhaps because they had rehearsed it beforehand, Duke Fisibelan stood up and said, "Your Majesty, House Fisibelan is extremely supportive of this policy. I am willing to give command of my frontier legion back to the Empire to your Majesty's control." "Cunning old man!" cried the nobles in their minds. Everyone with half a brain understood that Duke Fisibelan obviously got something out of it from being so obedient. Even though the Frontier Legion wasn't traditionally one of the 3 imperial legions, it had a stellar reputation. It was originally formed to curb raids from the grassland barbarians in the great northeastern plains at the borders of the empire. It was considered more to be a local force than a nationwide one. However, when they were wiping out the barbarians, Frontier Legion fell into the hands of House Fisibelan and came under the household name. Currently, there were 2 legions in Frontier, numbering up to 80,000 men. It was the main force of House Fisibelan, and Lorist formed Jaeger and stationed it in wild husbandry precisely to defend against them. Duke Fisibelan's ceding of control of the legion back to the empire meant that only 45,000 men, 1 full legion, of them would be given back to the empire. Since it used to be considered a local force, it would still roam in the northeastern provinces and wouldn't be House Fisibelan's troops in name only. Even though it sounded pleasant to say that the legion would return to Auguslo's control, it was still practically under Duke Fisibelan's command. The old guy truly was sly. He gave away one legion and kept the other as his own household force. In other words, it was just a subtle name change. Both legions were still controlled by House Fisibulan. Not only that, the house only had to pay for the maintenance of one legion, and the one that was given away would be funded by the empire, greatly decreasing the burden on the house. They could use the extra resource of their main household legion and the reserve legion, which used the mercenary model and was comprised of mostly grassland barbarians. Auguslo nodded with a smile. Duke Fisibulan, you are truly loyal to the empire and your actions are deserving of respect and praise. I recall that frontier legions' funding and equipment were provided by Wild Husbandry, Winston, and Southern. We'll follow old conventions then. Duke Fisibulan, you shall make a yearly budget for the legion to claim the subsidies from these 3 provinces. That was nothing short of a slight to the alliance of 4 houses. Winston, Wild Husbandry, and Southern used to be heavily raided by the grassland barbarians, and it was only because of their common enemy back then that the 3 provinces united to fund the Frontier Legion to curb the grassland barbarians. But ever since Frontier Legion became House Fisibulan's to control, that agreement was annulled. The expansion into East Wild also removed the threat from Winston and Southern. Frontier Legion was funded and commanded completely by House Fisibulan after that. Currently, Southern was House Felim's dominion and Winston and Wild Husbandry had become territories under Norton control. Auguslo's suggestion for the 3 provinces to fund Frontier Legion was a malicious move against the alliance of 4 houses to make them fund a rival's force. It really took some talent and thick skin for one to say what Auguslo casually did. Duke Felim slammed the golden goblet in his hand onto the table and stood up angrily. Impossible. Back then, Frontier Legion was formed to deal with the grassland barbarian threat. But are they still a danger to us? Frontier Legion is now under House Fisibulan's control, so why should we pay for it? Lorist sighed and stood up to calm Felim down. Back then, Southern wasn't Duke Felim's household dominion, so it was reasonable for it to bear part of the cost. But now, Southern belongs to House Felim. It wouldn't be appropriate to ask Southern to bear the cost of funding Frontier Legion. How about this? House Norton shall bear the cost of Frontier Legion and promises to make sure it is adequately funded. Overjoyed, Auguslo said, Brother Locke is understanding as always and ever willing to help the nation out. Duke Fisibulan also happily said, Do you mean it, Duke Norton? You can't go back on your words before so many nobles here. Of course, Lorist said with a nod, apart from the cost of supplies, House Norton is also willing to provide complete equipment for Frontier Legion. However, the condition for that is for the Legion to be reorganized by our house and be trained according to the equipment we provide. It is no surprise to anyone that the forces of our house are inferior to none. We will be willing to provide training and impart our experiences learned through battle to Frontier Legion without any holds barred. We only need half a year's time to ensure that Frontier returns to His Majesty as an elite force. Duke Fisibulan paled immediately. If Frontier Legion gets brought into the Norton Dominion to be trained by them, would they still listen to my orders? They'll become the Nortons' men for life. Since they count on the Nortons for everything from food to equipment, it goes without saying whose orders they will take. Only a fool will send Frontier Legion to be trained in the Norton Dominion. Auguslo also understood that point. Lorist found a way out of trouble with but a few simple statements. We'll discuss this another day since there's no rush. Also, Brother Locke, what are your thoughts about the demilitarization plan I proposed? The Empire is at peace now and House Norton no longer needs to sustain such a large force. I think your house can decrease from 4 to 2 legions. Maybe even 1 legion is enough. He went straight to the point. Lorist shook his head. Your Majesty, regrettably, I cannot agree to this proposal because that will affect the house's plans for more military excursions. Military excursions? Auguslo said, startled, where does House Norton intend to conquer next? It's no conquest, Your Majesty, don't worry. My house plans to expand into magical Dragon Mountains and the wildlands further north in our next phase. We want to pave a new province in the north and expand the empire's territory. We will be needing all 4 of our legions for that, 1 to be stationed at Wild Husbandry to defend against the grassland barbarians, and 1 back in the Northlands to defend our home. Actually, our forces are being drawn rather thin and we might even need the help of the other Duke's household forces. Lorist was referring to Kenmays, Shazin and Philim. That was in direct opposition to Auguslo's plan to have their forces decrease in scale. Auguslo's expression darkened. He thought that Lorist was just finding a random excuse to refuse his proposal. But he took a few deep breaths and forced himself to calm down. Locke, since you're unwilling to shrink your forces, I won't force the matter. But don't you think you should change the name of your Sentry Legion? It means the same thing as our Royal Guard and it can be confusing. Lorist smiled and said, All right, Your Majesty. I shall do as you wish. From this day henceforth, the Sentry Legion shall be named Iron Guard. Lorist didn't really care about what his legions were called. Since Auguslo had a problem with Sentry Legion, he'd just change it to Iron Guard, one he thought was easy to remember. What he didn't expect was that Auguslo would erupt in anger right after that. He kicked the table in front of him and turned to leave the hall. The banquet was over just like that. Even after he left the palace, Lorist was still oblivious to what happened and felt a little mad. Is Auguslo throwing a tantrum at me? How ridiculous! Kenmays laughed heartily and said, Locke, you're really something, you know that? Calling your legion Iron Guard is worse than not changing the name. You're insulting His Majesty straight to his face. Wait, I still don't know why it can't be called Iron Guard. Ha ha ha, did you forget? Back then, the force Duke Madras formed was called Iron Guard Legion. The 8,000 men of the Legion defended Kobo. His Majesty's father, the late King Andanak, brought the 60,000 men of the Royal Guard to besiege Kobo for 6 whole months and returned in failure with only 20,000 men remaining. That was what caused the great destabilization in the Empire and subsequently, its collapse. Yet, you started calling your Legion Iron Guard just like that. Aren't you trying to piss him off intentionally? You're pitting it against his Royal Guard. Lorist only just realized it. He had offhandedly named it Iron Guard, but Auguslo took it as an affront. The rift between them only grew deeper. However, Lorist didn't bother to explain his actions either and left the imperial capital the next day. As he lay comfortably on the beach, he said, His Majesty's proposal really put us in a pickle. He didn't really care about whether we would decrease our forces at all. He only wanted a clear record of their sizes. If we expand in the future, he can accuse us for having ulterior motives for doing so. We'll have no choice but to request help from his forces if we need more men, and that will result in the 3 legions being involved in our internal affairs. At least that's what I think he's planning. Kenmays finished the wine in his glass. His Majesty truly has lots on his mind. Of course. Lorist nodded. Now that we no longer have external threats, the next biggest thing to worry about is our alliance. Maybe His Majesty sees us as even more threatening than the trade union. That's why we can't afford to demilitarize. We'll have to keep up the military drills to keep our forces trained to ensure the safety and longevity of our dominions and houses. Chapter 577 Entanglement. There was bound to be difference in opinion anyway, so Lorist didn't really care what Auguslo thought. Even though the man was the emperor, Lorist would still do whatever he wanted. Continuing to develop the house step by step according to his plan was the best thing to do, and there was no need for him to change according to Auguslo's whims. In some sense, Lorist was entangled with Auguslo somehow. Back then, when Lorist was bringing the northbound convoy back to the Northlands, Charade, who was in charge of it back then, was used by Auguslo to further his own purposes when they passed through Andanak. They had helped Auguslo turn from a relegated prince to the de facto ruler of Andanak. Auguslo used the northbound convoy to exterminate any rebellious nobles within the kingdom and robbed power from his elder brother, the First Highness. In the end, he also forced the refugees of the kingdom to tag along with the northbound convoy to force it to its doom so that he could enjoy its benefits. That was the reason Charade and Potterfang didn't have the slightest goodwill towards Auguslo. With the northbound convoy facing oblivion, Lorist had to seek them out and leave the Northlands and come to an agreement with Auguslo. He swore allegiance to the true heirs of Chrisen's legacy, the Andanak royal family, in exchange for Silauas to be given to the house as their hereditary dominion. In the end, Lorist led the convoy to cross Lake Egret at night and attack the Duchy of Madras to open up a path for the convoy to travel north. Auguslo also used that chance to take Yunj Chandler from Madras and claim it as Andanak's territory. When they were working together to fight against Madras, Auguslo wanted to use the northbound convoy to deal with Second Prince Iblaya's army as well and sent for people to destroy Kobo's walls, intentionally plotting against him. Yet, as fate wanted it, Lorist managed to arrive at the Northlands with the convoy intact. During the next following years, Lorist and Auguslo had their own things to be busy with. After Auguslo defeated First Prince Red Lisa's invading army and signed a peace treaty with Duke Madras, Andanak's territory doubled. He won the reputation as one of the new genius military minds of the new generation. He continued to build his army for his dream of reuniting the empire. Lorist on the other hand defeated Duke Loggins when he returned to the Northlands and wiped out the magic beast wave that came to terrorize them on a yearly basis. He also defeated the second prince, who was pining for House Norton's wealth, causing the second prince to send a blade master to assassinate Lorist. He then ended up among the mountain barbarians. By the time he returned home, Lorist led an attack on Iblaya's capital, Windbury, and captured the second prince and formed the alliance of four houses. He stabilized the Northlands and went to his dominion, Silauas, for the first time while he transported the second prince for Auguslo to deal with. What he didn't expect to find was that the island had been messed up badly by Auguslo's tax collection officer and Seaview Manor had been occupied by some unruly descendants of other nobles. The subordinates Auguslo left behind also occupied the fertile land themselves and caused lots of trouble. Lorist decided to make a strong stand and captured the tax collection official and the colonel that was sent there, imprisoned the young nobles and attacked Farama village before heading to the imperial capital to see Auguslo. Auguslo on the other hand was busy building up his army of 300,000 by emptying the kingdom's wealth in it. He was going to reunite the empire with only 300,000 men and was feeling very good about himself. When he met Lorist, he even tried to convince House Norton to join the attempt. However, Lorist brought the tax collection official, colonel, and noble descendants there to him at that moment, which ended up being quite humiliating for him. When Auguslo was about to defend the tax collection official, Lorist killed him on the spot. That was the first huge conflict between Lorist and Auguslo. Auguslo ordered his blade master to give Lorist a lesson, but was surprised to find that the result was the opposite he had hoped for. Later, Lorist brought out King Iblaya, the second prince, that had been taken captive. He was one of the main perpetrators of the civil war in the empire. Auguslo was overjoyed and Lorist used that opportunity to leave the imperial capital. However, the tax collection official's elder brother and Auguslo's favored subordinate, General Count Aslan, brought 5,000 men to stop Lorist. Auguslo pretended not to notice. Surprisingly, Lorist used 500 guards to ruin all 5 of the camps of Count Arslan and defeated them horribly. Even Count Arslan died from the battle. Just as Auguslo was still recovering from the shocking battle, the war with Red Lees was just about to begin, so he had no choice but to give up on pursuing the matter with Lorist. When Lorist left the imperial capital, he went to Moronti to obtain the glass-making methods and got to know about the upcoming implementation of the nobility system by the trade union. He heard that the Big Seven guilds were trying to conquer Silauas, so to prevent the island from falling into Chictor's hands, Lorist intentionally used the glass-making method to incite war between the trade union and Tarabo to force the trade union's focus to turn to the southern part of the continent, kicking them off on the route of expansion. Lorist didn't expect that even though he had prevented Chictor's plans from coming to fruition, Silauas would be attacked by the slaver kingdom of Hanayabarta. To have his revenge, he led his troops to the distant Hanayabarta archipelago and exterminated the whole kingdom before taking the archipelago under house rule. As Lorist was preparing for that excursion, Auguslo paid a huge price to forcefully cross Cloud Snap Mountains during a harsh snowstorm and miraculously took Red Lisa's capital, Frederica. King Red Lise, the first prince of the former empire, disappeared ever since and the kingdom of Red Lise was no more. That battle shocked the whole Grindia continent. Auguslo was named the new northern war god, but he let the victory get to his head and made one mistake after another after he got the upper hand. He wanted to use force to deal with the nobles that aligned themselves with Red Lise and made unreasonable demands to the four central dukes. In the end, the two factions united against Auguslo and defeated his army time and again. At that moment, one of the big seven guilds, Wesha, started to pine after Frederica and bought Alger's rich resources and interfered with the war. Auguslo on the other hand fell sick badly after overexerting himself and crossing the mountains during winter, allowing Princess Carrie, the daughter of the late First Highness, to stage a rebel line and cut off the supplies for Auguslo's army. The forces at the front lines crumbled and Auguslo was trapped in Frederica. Faced with such a desperate situation, Auguslo barely managed to survive his sickness and left most of his forces to defend Frederica before he left with an elite force of a few thousand through a secret path. He would cross Cloud Snap Mountains again to retake Andanak and deal with the traitors. But due to his bad luck, he wandered into the place the first prince was hiding at and fought to a Pyrrhic victory with the first prince's personal forces. Even though he managed to kill the first prince, who was another main cause of the empire's civil war, Auguslo's forces were greatly wounded and he could no longer take back his kingdom. During the time when he was at his lowest, Lorist was busy developing his dominion after returning from a distant excursion. He reorganized his army and was going to tackle the backer of the Red Lise regime, House Fisibelan. He wanted to take the provinces in the northeastern area. It came as a surprise to him that Auguslo would show up within his dominion and request Lorist's help to restore him to his throne. That was the third time Lorist met Auguslo in person. After much negotiation, Lorist got the right to rule Delamoc and Winston from Auguslo. Those two provinces would become administrative areas of House Norden. He also managed to win the dominions of his allies, namely, Kenmays, Philim and Shizan, before agreeing to deploy his forces to retake the kingdom for Auguslo. Lorist's forces attacked Siglar from sea during winter and exterminated the Duchy of Madras before Tigersor was sent to Andanak to take the imperial capital. The rebellious nobles were all exterminated and Auguslo was restored to his throne. At the same time, House Norton's amazing military prowess began to make Auguslo wary. After helping Auguslo, Lorist turned his gaze to the decaying kingdom of Iblia. He led his forces to take Windbury by surprise and chased Duke Fisibelan, who was prepared to reshape the kingdom to suit his needs, away, thereby exterminating Iblia for good. After that, the Nortons greatly wounded House Fisibelan's forces and the 80,000+ of the four central duchies and cut off all relation between House Fisibelan and the four central duchies. However, the Duke's reputation of war god of the plains wasn't just for show. Even though he suffered a loss in southern, he managed to deal Lorist a huge blow at wild husbandry. Duke Fisibelan gathered 100,000 grassland barbarians to lay in ambush in wild husbandry and almost defeated the newly formed Jaeger Legion in its entirety. That was the biggest loss Lorist sustained since he took over the house. Just when Lorist thought that he could use the four allied houses to force Duke Fisibelan to surrender and get the wealth of House Fisibelan for his allies and him, Auguslo interfered and barged into House Fisibelan's territory and made a deal with Duke Fisibelan. House Fisibelan was declared once more a part of Andanak and Auguslo took the Duke's granddaughter, Kakane, as his wife, thwarting Lorist's plans and allowing House Fisibelan to live. Right after that, Auguslo planned to attack the four central duchies and managed to convince Lorist and Duke Fisibelan to offer aid. During that battle, Lorist made up with Fisibelan and no longer considered each other enemies, restoring a friendly trade relation. The Duke also said that he wasn't interested in fighting Lorist for supremacy over the northeastern area and would be willing to settle into the new order set by the Nortons. After attacking the four central duchies, Auguslo turned his sights to the remaining provinces by the empire currently occupied by the trade union. Once more, he got Lorist's help to conquer Enderwolf, Magic, Bodalger, and Kenbana while exterminating one of the big 7 guilds, Wesha. Auguslo also conquered the northwestern area. His own forces with the allied noble army and House Norton's forces allied together to form the million-man army that was stationed at the borders of the trade union. Auguslo thought that he wouldn't have to actually fight a battle and could force the trade union to surrender with pressure alone. They would return the 2 provinces that were still occupied and sign a peace agreement with him. But the trade union chose instead to send the Windstorm Sword Saint to the negotiation to bring Auguslo and all the other nobles to Moronti to confess their sins while the trade union launched their own attack to catch the million-man army off guard. Lorist stepped forward at the crucial moment and fought to a bloody draw with the Windstorm Sword Saint. House Norton's firm Rock Legion managed to hold the Union forces back and won enough time for Auguslo to gather his forces and mount a counterattack. After that, House Norton's 3 legions joined Auguslo in wiping out the main force of the trade union. That was the time Lorist and Auguslo's relationship was at their closest. Auguslo was filled with respect for Lorist, a sword saint. That was why after he suffered such huge losses from the 3 years of war on Folic Plains and requested Lorist for aid, Lorist agreed. After that, House Norton's North Sea fleet exterminated Invincible Fleet and took Moronti from Hyde Gold Bay, turning the tables on the battle at Folic Plains immediately and forcing the Union forces out. Lorist saved the nobles of Andanak from losing all their forces and emerged victorious in the Great Battle of Bluewek. In another 3 years' time, he would tear the trade union into multiple pieces and force it to surrender in the end. But now that Auguslo no longer had the external threat that was the trade union and gotten his dream of becoming the emperor that restored the Chrisen Empire, he became even more wary of House Norton's might. Even though Lorist had taken up the mantle of the kingdom's sword saint, Auguslo was still filled with suspicion towards House Norton's power. His suggestion of downsizing their forces was merely a test he had for Lorist. Lorist was certain that the new emperor would definitely think up lots of other methods to test the patience of Lorist and the alliance of 4 houses. Chapter 578 Free Citizens. There were only 2 things in 1783 that concerned Lorist. The first was the grand ceremony of Auguslo's ascension. Even though it was already over, the falling out with him and the wariness he had for House Norton and the 4 allied houses only grew. The 2 factions were practically rivals and it seemed like their battle would be battled out in the arena that was the Chrisen Empire. Before Lorist the Sword Saint and Auguslo the Emperor settled who won, the situation wouldn't calm down. The other matter was the construction of the Grand Palace in Rage Bear. After 3 hard 3 years, and the painstaking effort of nearly 200,000 laborers, the Grand Palace was finally complete. On Grindia, there was no tax for constructing new properties. As long as nobles had the money and power, they could build a palace even grander than that of the royal families and make it their residence. Not only was that a display of wealth, it would also serve as a legacy for their descendants to inherit, while also helping the house leave a mark in the annals of history. Handra's Incubi Palace and Foran's Summer Palace were such examples. What dumbfounded Lorist was that he had made the decision to construct the Palace Ursa Rex wasn't for the fame, but rather to solve the issue with overproduction of a mineable resource in the Dominion. In other words, he was increasing demand for the material to make up for the falling prices and also giving the farmers a chance to earn some extra money, which could then be used to stock up on more of House Norton's products. That way, the Dominion's economy would get the stimulation it needed and the folk would lose the habit of saving every single coin they made. That was why even though Palace Ursa Rex was grand in size, it wasn't very detailed and ornate to squinted eyes. The grandest palaces on Grindia were no different from several beautiful manors and castles linked together with a shared garden. They were far from what Lorist imagined fantasy world castles would look like. And given that the term of the project was quite short, it couldn't compare to some palaces in his past life, which easily took more than a decade to construct. Then again, perhaps because of the advent of Battle Force, the people in this world had an advantage when it came to building speed. Battle force using workers could easily lift large rocks and greatly increase the efficacy of construction. Lorist had interfered with the design of Palace Ursa Rex to resemble the Forbidden City which he had seen during a visit with his secretary once. Even though he couldn't exactly replicate the whole thing, the grand scale of the whole project earned Siroba's awe. The old architect's belief that Lorist had architectural talent was once again reinforced through the layout and design he provided of the buildings. But when Lorist received the final designs and saw the Gothic-style decorations on his Chinese-style palace, he thought that it felt a bit off, but it was already too late to change. Siroba on the other hand was filled to the brim with ambition. He was driven to make Palace Ursa Rex a grandiose structural marvel so as to leave his mark in the world of architecture. Had Lorist not decided on the name of the palace early on, Siroba would be willing to give up on his riches, title, and everything else to have the building named after him. If it were called Palace Siroba, he would die with no regrets. The grand architect spared no effort when it came to the construction and monitored the whole project closely, not letting off the slightest mistake. He even lived on the site itself. Given the humongous nature of the project, its term was set at 2 years and its budget, 2 million gold fords. But due to Siroba's request, it swelled to 3 million, 5 million, and finally, 8 million with Spiel's permission following the proposal to make it the greatest palace ever built on the continent. The term of construction was also lengthened to 3.5 years while the 100,000 laborers doubled. They were all brought over from various other project sites. Spiel didn't think that spending so much on Palace Ursa Rex was a waste as it was a core matter of the house. Given House Norton's current might and prosperity, it required a palace just as grand to flaunt and make a statement. That was all the more justified taking into the fact that Lorist was a sword saint of the kingdom. He was the greatest thing to ever come out of House Norton during the past 3 centuries. A residence fitting for his status was obligatory. After a few centuries, his descendants would also live in that palace proudly and admire his legacy. When Lorist received that proposal, he was completely dumbstruck. A budget of 8 million gold fords was more than 3 times the annual income received by the house a few years back. The usually stingy and pauper-like Spiel actually agreed to spend so much. If Lorist didn't trust in the chief finance supervisor's usual tact and wit and his scrutiny for every single bit of spending, he was going to send people to investigate whether there was corruption involved in the project. Fortunately, the house had already established their trade route to the south of the continent and earned around 6 million gold fords yearly by exporting the goods it produced to Moronti. Jilin Harbour's market also brought some 1 million gold fords in profit. Even though the house spent 3 hard years to defeat the trade union and lent so much money to the Free Union to aid their development, the income largely made up for the costs and there wasn't a need to worry about any financial crisis brewing in the following years. Lorist smiled bitterly when he saw the figure of 8 million. He was more than willing on spending that amount on raising living standards for the citizens or improving the gear of his forces. He didn't want a grand palace in the first place and how it had all come to this was genuinely a surprise to him. The budget for the palace that was planned to stimulate the household economy didn't require it to be grand or well decorated. But now, there was nothing he could change about the quadrupled budget. He had no choice but to live in the palace. He didn't quite like living there. Unlike his expectant lovers and children, Lorist much preferred staying in simple fortress strongholds like Firm Rock. He could hear the horns to wake the forces in the morning and listen to the grunts of the training soldiers. That was the life he truly wanted to read. He recalled a saying he read in his past life, "A beautiful palace is nothing but a beautiful cage in which the emperor locks himself." That's why there are no heroes after the wise founding emperor because they have been spoiled by their luxuries and lost touch with reality, being toyed around by the others like birds in a cage. That was the case as well with the Song dynasty. The succeeding emperors were nothing but shipwreck after another. During the 10th month, Lorist left Silaoz with his family members and arrived in the Northlands. He was already preparing to move into Palace Ursa Rex. If he were honest, he didn't really like the name of the palace, which was set after the elders of the house all agreed to it. Since House Norton was called the Roaring, Raging Bear of the Northlands, the names suggested by the elders all had something to do with bears. Palace Ursa Rex was the one that was picked for its imposingness. Lorist settled with it because it was at least better than Palace Siroba. Your Grace, in the palace are 3,461 statues of a magic beast bear in various poses. To capture a sense of reality, we captured 17 magic beast bears from the wild and sketched them for reference and picked some poses that were most suited to be made into sculptures, introduced Siroba as he pointed to the various bear statues placed across the palace according to his design. Ah, so all the money was spent by you. Do you think we're in a bear museum? Commented Lorist in his mind. Unlike the heart-aching Lorist, his lovers and children were all stunned by the beauty and majesty of the palace. Sylvia loved her new abode. The children on the other hand had long dispersed and started playing tag around the bear statues. Anderbale climbed up the largest statue and stood proudly to show off, much to his personal caretaker's anxious worry. I'm so busy and tired. Ever since returning to the Dominion, Lorist had to move as well as plan the New Year's celebration at Palace Ursa Rex. As it was the first time the celebration was being held at that venue, Lorist didn't dare to slack off. He welcomed one guest after another daily and missed the peaceful and relaxing days he spent at Cherry Blossom Ridge last year. After the new year, everything finally quieted down for Lorist during the rainy season. The year of 1784 had arrived and I was when House Norton would begin their expansion towards the northern border of the empire into the magical Dragon Mountains. A new province would be formed with Twinmont Town at its center, giving the house another province under their jurisdiction. The province would be henceforth named Montside after the fact that it was beside magical Dragon Mountains. I intend to implement a policy that allows private ownership of land in this province, decided Lorist. In some sense, the current 3 million plus subjects living in the Norton Dominion were no different from tenants as all the land in the Northlands belonged to the house. Even though House Norton forcefully moved more than 2 million other citizens into their domain and gave them farmland and houses to settle down, they didn't really own those. They had to pay half of their crop harvest to the house as rent. Both the land and the house couldn't be sold away either, but they could be renovated and inherited by their descendants. But in doing so, they would have to pay a fee to the house for the procedures. In the Northlands, apart from the manors given by House Norton to the gold-ranked knights, even the land of Dawn Academy and the special noble district belonged to House Norton. The lease of Dawn Academy's land was indefinitely termed and free for them to use, but if the Academy wanted to move away, the land would be returned to House Norton unconditionally. The special noble district was slightly different. House Norton sold them the right to use the land however they saw fit. The nobles were free to construct their own manors and castles and give them to their descendants and also sell and trade them without obstruction from the house. However, the current owner of the land still had to pay a sum to the house on an annual basis. Even though the sum wasn't huge, if the sum wasn't paid and accumulated up to a certain amount, House Norton had the right to confiscate everything within it including any manors or castles built. However, the house wasn't such a ravenous, blood-sucking vampire. They would auction the property away and only take what they were owed before returning the extra money to the debtor. Alternatively, a noble could pass on the property and debts to another for them to bear. However, that meant a departure from the noble circle in the Northlands and that was a method only employed during the most desperate of times. The nobles were even willing to borrow money from high-interest lenders just to be allowed to stay in the special noble district, because there was always hope for recovery as long as they remained. As for the reason for the boost in real estate price in Felicitas's 7 towns, it was due to the special districts that were built there. The only difference was that it wasn't exclusive to nobles. The treatment the residents there would receive was the same. That was an opportunity for the richer folk in the Dominion as the houses in the special district were far better than the free ones they were given. Farmers that purchased the houses would be able to return their former one to House Norton and get a 10% tax cut on their crops. The largest difference between the household dominion and the territories under the house's jurisdiction was that in the household dominion, the main house was the highest power. The true people with power in territories under the house's jurisdiction were the nobles that were enfeoffed there. Apart from those lands, the remaining land belonged to the main house. So, for larger noble houses, they were really unwilling to make vassals of their subordinates because the produce of the dominion belonged to the house. The house stood to lose income after enfeoffing part of the dominion to a vassal noble. Lorist intended to implement a private property policy in the new province on Mont's side. In other words, he was going to give away all the right to ownership to the land there of the house. The province would be the free domain of capitalists, and it was done so because of need. Montside was a new province and it required people. However, most of the subjects of the house were forced to move to the Northlands. Given that Montside bordered magical dragon mountains, not only were they exposed to barbarian raids, they also had to defend against magic beasts. The people living there required the ability to defend themselves to survive. While most of the barbarians and magic beasts could be countered by the household forces, small-scale bandit raids and random animal attacks were going to happen even with the precautions in place. So, Lorist set his sights on the retired household soldiers and mercenaries. He would offer them the tantalizing prospect of owning their own land in Montside, and each retired soldier of the house would receive around 17 square meters of land in Montside and be allowed to do anything with it as they pleased. 10 They could transfer it to their descendants or sell them to other people without the permission of House Norton. Perhaps the land-owning citizens of Montside will become the first of truly free citizens in our domain, said Lorist. Chapter 579 Auguslo's Provocation. Our new project by the same author, Black Iron's Glory, is launched with daily releases moving forward. Do give it a try here. Oh? Where am I? Lorist opened his eyes groggily to the milk-yellow wooden wall beside him. The wooden patterns formed an odd picture. The soft bed veil fluttered above the gold-plated bronze bed rack with the wind. The breeze of dawn entered his room from the 2 open windows, causing the violet crystal wind chimes that hung by them to ring a pleasant tune. Looking at the chandelier hanging from the white ceiling and the magic beast bear engraving on the wall, he finally snapped awake. Oh, this is Palace Ursa Rex, my new home. I'm within Maria's bedroom. His initial puzzlement came as no surprise. Even though he had been living in the palace for 3 to 4 months already, he spent most of his time sleeping in his master bedroom with Sylvia or within his study. Last night, it was Maria's turn to accompany him. He didn't call her to him, but instead, went to her room and spent the night there. It was no wonder he didn't recognize where he was when he woke up. Dear, you're awake. Maria opened her eyes groggily and brought her naked body towards Lorist. She reached her right hand out to feel Lorist's crotch up in a practiced manner and soon wrapped it around the morning-hardened shaft. Soon, she retreated into the blankets with the grace of a swan all the way until her head reached his crotch. I don't want any morning exercise today. That was what Lorist wanted to say at first, but his body responded more honestly than he wished. Even after going at it twice with Maria yesterday, Lorist's member hardened like steel from her playful tongue-teasing. I think I'll have to get more rest in the study later today, thought Lorist as he raised her up and plunged himself deep into her. What he didn't expect was that there would be so many things that he had to deal with. Your Grace, according to Tarkal's report, our Emperor has just lowered the amount of money required for an honorary noble title. An honorary Viscount title cost only 5,000 gold forts, but the honorary Count title is still the same at 8,000. Charade looked at the documents in his hand with a strict expression. During the latter half of last year, His Imperial Majesty has entitled more than 130 honorary nobles and gained no less than 500,000 gold forts. What's worth noting is that most of the ones purchasing the titles are tycoons from our dominion who benefit most from the trade in Moronti. After becoming rich, they hope to be able to mingle among high society, so they spent that money to gain imperial honorary noble status. Lorist shrugged. This isn't something we can do anything about. We can stop them from gaining honorary noble status, can we? The imperial decoration is far more glorious than our own after all. Charade's response, however, put Lorist at a loss for words. No, Your Grace, they purchased an honorary title from the empire and returned to convert them into noble titles conferred by our house after paying a fee. It costs about 8,000 gold fords to gain honorary baron status from our house, but the process of transferring an imperial honorary noble title to one of ours cost only 2,000 plus. They will save 3,000 gold fords in total by doing so. Pitiful merchants, wanting to save that small amount of money, muttered Lorist with admiration. Offering honorary titles for sale was common among the kingdoms and powerful noble houses. For the rich, obtaining an honorary title was akin to making sure their family and household would be kept safe. They would also gain a hike in status and be allowed to mingle among the noble circle. If they were lucky, they might even gain ownership of land one day and become a proper landed noble. House Kenmays was one such example. Only by mingling in the noble circle first could they stand a chance to serve a liege and possibly earn their favor. Becoming a proper landed noble would no longer be an impossible dream to achieve in the long term. That was why many of the new rich in the Northern Dominion wanted to convert the titles. What dissatisfied Charade was how they'd buy titles from Auguslo for conversion. Wasn't that letting Auguslo benefit for nothing? Lorist on the other hand was quite satisfied that those imperial honorary nobles converted their titles to Norton honorary titles. That meant that the confidence in House Norton's continued development in the future was high. They believed in the stability of the institution than in the empire. It was a sign that everyone still kept a clear head and didn't pay attention to Auguslo. However, he also felt a little uncomfortable with the notion of having been taken advantage of. After some consideration, he instructed, well, just adjust the conversion fee for an imperial honorary title to about 2 times the total price. That will stop anyone from doing so, and His Imperial Majesty will no longer benefit from this conversion scheme. Charade nodded. That was a surefire way to curb the matter. If the conversion ended up costing more than buying one from House Norton directly, they'd rather go for the latter option from the get-go. Your Grace, as the number of honorary nobles in our dominion grew by quite a lot, many of them are petitioning for us to expand the special noble districts for them to purchase land and build manors and castles. After the Administrative Bureau made a survey, we believe that we can set up 3 more special noble districts between the existing ones and Palace Ursa Rex. We can link them together with the 5 older ones. It's still a rough draft for now, and we will naturally make sure that the districts are at least 300 meters away from the palace for security purposes. Charade handed a document to Lorist, who gave it a look and signed. The request for 3 more special noble districts to be built was approved just like that. Another thing, the Administrative Bureau is preparing to move forward with our residential area construction plan in Redriver Valley and Salis in the coming 2 years. The House Finance Department has approved the plan and is ready to invest 5 million gold fords for the development over the course of 5 years. It's estimated to earn us around 37 million gold fords after that. This is the master plan, please sign here. The real estate business of the 7 towns of Felicitas had earned the house great returns for their investment. Even though there were quite a number of obstacles they had to work through and only finished development after 6 years, they were all solved in the end. It could be said that almost everyone living in Felicitas bought their own homes and started living in them. The house earned 13 million gold fords in profit from that, causing Viscount Spiel, the chief finance supervisor of the house, to turn his sights on the 3 million plus citizens in the Northlands. Spiel came up with a plan to have almost all the citizens move into houses they bought within a span of 10 years. He was intent on scouring their wealth clean. If they had no money, that was no matter. The house could let them take loans and buy houses, which would have to be repaid in a decade or 2. 2 years ago when Lorist was still in Moronti considering how to deal with the trade union, he sighed with awe at Spiel's harshness and sharp wit when he read that proposal. It could make almost all the citizens into workers slaving away for their own homes. Lorist understood that the house had invested no less than 50 million gold fords in the Dominion during the past decade, including the salaries and bonuses of the soldiers, the costs of forcing the refugees to move and providing them with farmland and houses, the starting of new factories and mines, and so on. Behind all that was a huge, jaw-dropping budget. The wealth in the Northlands didn't lie in the millions of gold forts it provided the house, but rather, the many factories and small business spread across it, such as food stalls, grocery shops, salons, tailors, the production of daily necessities, as well as the job opportunities they all provided workers. The passage of the past few years caused every commoner household in the Northlands to amass up to tens and hundreds of gold forts, which they kept for emergency use. Spiel was gunning for the gold forts of these commoner households. If he could spur them to spend their hard-earned stash on the newly developed houses, the amount the house would earn was unbelievable. Spiel's eyes were bloodshot at the thought of that. But considering that the house was fighting a war with the trade union and required time to recover, the plan was postponed back then. Last year, Spiel brought that plan up again and Lorist finally allowed it to be carried out in Redriver Valley and Salis. Given that those two places were among the first territories of the house, they were the next candidates for the housing project as the citizens had lived there for quite some time and had amassed quite a bit of wealth. After signing the document, Lorist handed it back to Charade and asked, "Is there anything notable about the situation with Montside?" Charade replied, "Your Grace, because of the private land ownership policy, we received nearly 100,000 applications. Currently, we are doing initial surveys and that will take another half a month before we have a conclusive picture on things. We estimate that we will approve around 30,000 citizens in the first wave. There are around 4,000 qualified mercenaries and retired soldiers which we requested. The rest are people who have only trained with the local garrison forces for a few days, only there to fill up the number. Montside is different from other provinces. We don't need to develop it as a whole for now. Everything must be done with proper pacing," Lorist said as he put his legs on his desk and leaned into his chair. "Sending powerless citizens there is exposing them to danger carelessly. The place is far too close to the wildlands and magical dragon mountains. So far, Firm Rock has set up defense lines around the most dangerous areas, while Tigersaur had almost exterminated all the magic beasts in the wildlands. I estimate that it will take around 4 to 5 years for the situation there to stabilize. The citizens we're recruiting to send to Montside now should be just enough to populate a few towns. We don't need to rush this." "I understand," Charade said after some thought, "but, Your Grace, many honorary nobles wrote us or sent people on their behalf to ask about the private land-owning policy. I suspect that they're trying to rely on buying land in Montside to become recognized as landed nobles. Hehe, aren't they optimistic? Tell them that each person can only own up to 17 square meters of land at most. The allocation of land will also be based on drawn lots. Even if a mercenary band signs up for it, the land they receive might not be linked together. Also, not all the land in the province is for sale. At most, half is open for civilian purchase and the other half is to be used as land to enfeoff to people with contributions." After Charade left, Malak and Tarkal entered right away, not giving Lorist any time to rest. "Your Grace, we have news straight from the imperial capital. His Imperial Majesty has stationed Fierce-Gale Legion in Mesen. The reason they gave for that is that they're preparing to eliminate bandits in the 11 central provinces. There are also rumors that Wit-Elian Legion is going to be called back and stationed in Welbisha," said Tarkal. Lorist stood up from his desk right away. "What's that fool thinking? Is he going to declare war against our alliance?" Malak and Tarkal knew who Lorist was referring to as a fool, but they feigned ignorance. Welbisha neighboured Yunj Chandler and the two provinces were separated only by Egret Lake and linked by a single mountain path on land. Madras's Iron Guard Legion was stationed at the border in Lichtana Citadel back in the day and forbade Charade's convoy from passing. Auguslo was going to use more than 100,000 refugees to besiege the citadel and opened up a bloody path for the northbound convoy to pass. Fortunately, Lorist rushed all the way from the Dominion and led the convoy through the frozen Egret Lake and used a night attack to cut off Iron Guard Legion's water supply, which allowed Auguslo to take the citadel with ease and storm Yunj Chandler. Currently, Auguslo was moving Wit-Elian Legion back to Welbisha, obviously with ill intent against Yunj Chandler, which was under Norton control. Given that Wittelian Legion was an army used to deal with internal threats, was Augustlo sending the message that House Norton was to be treated as an enemy nation? The newly formed Fierce-Gale Legion was also stationed at Mesen, which was a blatant affront to the alliance of four houses. Apart from House Shizan, whose dominion had moved to Korabia, one of the central provinces, Fierce-Gale's presence in Mesen seemed to aim to cut off House Norton, House Kenmays and House Felim's contact with the outside world, just like Wittelian. It was no wonder Lorist called Augustlo a fool for intentionally doing something so provocative. Have Els bring Iron Guard Legion to Yunj Chandler and rebuild Lichtana Citadel. Include the mountain path into the defense perimeter and set up cannons on Bread Hills. Make sure to let it seem like our defenses are really tight. Also, build a few shipyards at Egret Lake to construct cannon-armed ships to sail and patrol the lake. Not a single boat or raft on the other shore should be allowed to enter the waters. Get the shipbuilders from Bullhorn Bay. Our house has invested near 10 million gold forts in Yunj Chandler and the development is just about to finish. That fool is obviously not going to let us profit that easily. Lorist quickly came up with countermeasures. Also, have Jaeger travel to House Shizan's dominion. Give the reason that we've received an invitation from him to defend his dominion. That way, we can sandwich Fierce-Gale Legion along with House Felim's Pegasus Legion in southern. I wanna see how Augustlo gets Fierce-Gale out of there. Understood, Your Grace, said Malak. Chapter 580 Plundering Incident. Hey guys! Prince here. So I made it through surgery. Now 4 1/4 teeth lighter, 3 wisdom teeth, 1 molar, and 1/4 of a poor bystander, which will have to be fixed once the mouth is in working order again. The worst part for me is always waking up from anesthesia afterwards. That feeling of being awake but with only half your head working is the worst. Anyway, I look and feel like I've been through a boxing match, and I suppose you could say I have. The pain medication is doing its thing, though, and, whilst making me feel like I haven't slept in days, it keeps the pain at bay. So I can get back to editing and you guys can get back to reading. Don't forget to join our Discord server if you guys want to hear about these kinds of shenanigans as they're happening or just want to argue with people over which of Lorist's concubines makes the best waifu. Toothless regards. Prince. Back during the attack on the 4 central duchies, Lorist led the alliance of 4 houses to attack the Duchy of Shabaj and raided its territory of Rimad, Mesen, and Jigzay. The allied noble army that joined in to take advantage only made the 3 provinces nothing but hell on earth. About 800,000 subjects became the spoils of the victors and were forced to move to different dominions. Had it not been for Augustlo's arrival, Jigzay would have ended up like Rimad and Mesen, completely empty and desolate. It had been almost a decade since that conflict, yet Mesen and Rimad still hadn't recovered their vitality. The population was ever so dwindling. The central area's predicament was also partly due to mismanagement. Augustlo didn't enact any civilian-friendly policies and focused on rebuilding his army. He raised taxes on the farmers to foot the cost of sustaining his army, resulting in the bandits within the 11 central provinces gathering together. Many nobles that were dissatisfied with Augustlo were in cahoots with them, adding to the difficulty of stabilizing the situation. That was especially the case after Augustlo left with his 300,000 troops he trained in the 11 provinces for the front lines at the trade union. With the army gone, banditry rose significantly due to support from certain factions. The 11 central provinces had become the most chaotic area in the kingdom. Augustlo had sent a division of local noble troops to curb the matter, but when the bandits were no longer able to withstand the pressure, they simply went to the forested areas of Mesen and Rimad. The pursuing soldiers had no choice but to give up on the bandits who had escaped deep into the woods. It was not until House Norton prepared to attack the trade union-controlled Magic and Anderwolf that the soldiers stationed in the 11 central provinces were provided with supplies to continue their bandit-curbing operation. Lorist ordered his eldest disciple, Reedy, and Blade Master Shus to lead the Guard Brigade and aid Elza's Sentry Legion on a large-scale cleanup operation to exterminate the bandits. Only then did the situation within the 11 central provinces stabilize slightly. But following the war between the trade union and Andanak, bandit activity in the central provinces recovered and grew even worse. The 3 bloody years on Falak Plains only served to chip away at the nobles' forces. Even the dukes, Forand, Fizibalan, and Shizan, returned to their dominions in the central provinces and were only barely able to defend their dominion. They weren't able to do anything about the neighboring provinces. After Auguslo returned from Falak Plains, he disbanded the remainder of the kingdom's forces and spread them throughout the territory controlled by the royal family to form local garrisons to keep the peace. But due to a lack of funding, much of the plans were never implemented. The best Auguslo could do for the central provinces was send some men over to defend the more important towns without being able to help the smaller towns and villages at all. When Auguslo's illegitimate son, Wexes, was in charge of managing the defences of the imperial capital, he gave the order for tax to be strictly collected in the form of cash due to their nearly emptied treasuries, causing many farmers in the central provinces to be unable to bear that kind of burden and side with the bandits, unleashing even more chaos. A few towns were even taken over by them. Had Auguslo not taken another Fizibalan as queen and relied on House Fizibalan's funds and gear to quell those revolts, the consequences he would have to deal with would be even more troublesome. Currently, Auguslo was forming a new fierce-scale legion using the local garrison forces that were involved in quelling those revolts. Though the reason for its formation was the extermination of bandits, its placement was nothing short of in poor taste. Geographically speaking, that was a sound decision that showed Auguslo's trained eye for military affairs. Mesen was the central hub of transportation and a strategic location in the northeastern area of the empire. The routes from southern, Yunj-Chandler, and even Egret Lake passed through Mesen. For Lorist, Auguslo's stationing of Wittelian and Fierce-Gale to seal off the 2 ways out from the northeastern area of the empire was no big deal for House Norden, because they still had the sea route. However, that move severed the connection between the 3 houses of the alliance and House Shizan. Given that Salt Merchant Committee had proliferated throughout the empire, the secession was even more crucial. In other words, it meant that the committee's activities would be at mercy to the 2 legions. Should any accident come to pass, the alliance of 4 houses wouldn't tolerate it. In terms of strategic battle placement, stationing Fierce-Gale in Mesen was a great move. Rimad and Southern neighboured each other and House Felim's might had recovered rather well over the past 2 years. Duke Felim ordered his household force, Pegasus, to continue eradicating bandits in Rimad to protect Southern from any raids. And as Mesen was an important trade route for Salt Merchant Committee, it wouldn't be out of place for House Felim and House Shizan to have their forces to conduct bandit sweeps there. That made the route from Southern to Shizan's dominion in the central province of Korabia a much safer one. But after Fierce-Gale was moved to Mesen, that trade route was cut off. That only served to intensify Lorist's suspicions that Auguslo was the one behind the attempted assassinations of Kenmays. Otherwise, why would he do something like cutting off the Salt Merchant Committee's trade? Even more infuriating and causing Lorist to call him a fool was even though House Norton had gained access to a doorway to riches through trade in the south of the continent, he still couldn't give up on the market in the 30-plus provinces of the empire. The goods ordered by Salt Merchant Committee annually would amount to around 4 million gold fords in total, and the profit of 1 or 2 million was the key to maintaining the alliance. So, Lorist couldn't tolerate Auguslo for coming for the Salt Merchant Committee. If Auguslo was on good terms with the alliance, then Fierce-Gale Legion might even be welcomed by them in Mesen, as House Felim could earn a bit from selling supplies to them. But given their tense relations, Auguslo's actions only seemed to be of malign intent. The current situation of Mesen caused Fierce-Gale to be unable to sustain themselves from the land either. Rimad was also raided clean. Not only that, Jigzay and Samora were in a really bad economical state and wouldn't be able to offer Fierce-Gale any aid either. They had to depend on transporting large amounts of supplies from the southern provinces all the way to Mesen. Based on what was being transported, Lorist would never believe that Auguslo's reason for stationing Fierce-Gale there was to eliminate bandits. First of all, how could they deal with the bandits if they couldn't defend their supply line properly? If they were really going for the bandits, the right thing to do was to head to Handra's household dominion and start exterminating the bandits in provinces where their presence was weaker step by step. Only with that and good management could the situation really be stabilized. The towns and villages should be defended to wipe the bandits out completely instead of sending troops directly to Meissen. Your Grace, Duke Kenmays sent an urgent letter to report that one of the Salt Merchant Committee's trading convoys that left 3 days ago lost contact after passing through Egret Swamp. The Duke has already requested Duke Phelim to send Pegasus out to investigate, reported Genalio. Lorist had been expecting news like that for a long time. No need to wonder. Who else but Fierce Gale can engulf a trade convoy of 3,000 people? Send an eagle message to Freyar and get him to work with Duke Shazin's forces. We can act now. Notify Duke Phelim to send Pegasus to seal off Remad as well, ordered Lorist. After waiting for 3 agonizing months, it was finally the time to strike. Lorist sent Jaeger to Korabia, Shazin's dominion, on the grounds that the Duke himself requested aid to deal with bandits. Actually, they were there to disguise themselves as bandits to attack the supply line of Fierce Gale. Auguslo's troops spent a grueling 3 months in Meissen with huge ration shortages, and their messengers they sent out would be spirited away for no reason. Their communication with the outside world could be said to have been cut off. Under such circumstances, the trading convoy of Salt Merchant Committee seemed like a juicy sheep waiting to be eaten. Other things aside, they could at least sate their hunger with the rations of the convoy and charge them a huge toll to be allowed to pass. Even though Salt Merchant Committee was considered to be an imperial trading guild, Duke Kenmays usually didn't pay much heed to the officers of Fierce Gale, especially elites like the general, so they had long received secret orders from Auguslo to cause trouble for Salt Merchant Committee. That was a chance that they wouldn't miss. Yet, the trading convoy refused to adhere to the Legion's demands. Usually, the convoy would be refused passage if they refused to pay a toll. The convoy had 2 choices, give what was demanded of them or go home. But given how desperate Fierce Gale was, they would never let the convoy go, so they acted and managed to force the rest of the convoy into their army camp after killing some hundreds of people. It was only then that the general and commanding officers knew they screwed up big time. The most glaring fault of their actions lay with the casualties both sides suffered. Fierce Gale suffered a few hundred casualties, and even more resisting merchants perished as a result. If it was a small trading convoy, the general could just give the order to silence them and toss the corpses into a valley somewhere and refuse to admit fault. But the large convoy had about 3,000 people, and silencing them would prove to be no easy task. Now, they could only imprison them in the army camp and report it to Auguslo to await further instruction. But the moment Fierce Gale sent out the report, it was attacked by Jaeger, Pegasus, and Shazin's forces. House Norton stormed Fierce Gale with tens of cannons and soon decimated them. The soldiers either discarded their weapons and surrendered or ran around chaotically. However, thanks to the tight encirclement of Pegasus and Jaeger, they were captured and taken prisoner in the end. That incident proved to be the greatest scandal in the Empire during year 1784. One of the 3 newly formed imperial legions, Fierce Gale, whose task was to exterminate bandits, had resorted to banditry themselves and were about to kill off 3,000 people from Salt Merchant Committee's trading convoy to silence them. Fortunately, the moment the Alliance of 4 Houses received word of the missing convoy, they immediately sent their troops to break into Fierce Gale's camp before the convoy members were harmed, successfully saving them. If the Alliance of 4 Houses attacked Fierce Gale when nothing like that happened to the convoy, Auguslo could declare the Alliance of 4 Houses treasonous traitors and summon all other nobles in the Empire to wipe them and their leader, House Norton, out. Even if they weren't able to win, it would help quench Auguslo's fire and he could apply more pressure on Lorist during negotiations to accept even the most egregious of Auguslo's demands. However, Fierce Gale was caught red-handed and the proof was undeniable. Not only did the merchants provide testimony to that case, even a few of the simpler-minded commanding officers of Fierce Gale admitted everything, thinking that Auguslo would stand behind their backs. The report they were going to send to Auguslo was also intercepted and had the handwriting and personal seal of Fierscale's general, making it undeniable proof. Even Auguslo wasn't able to explain his way out of it. Duke Kenmays had a long novel written about the whole affair, containing the testimonies provided by the officers of Fierscale, the accounts of the surviving merchants, as well as the report Fierscale attempted to send Auguslo, and spread as many copies as far as he could. Virtually every noble in the empire received a copy, and some even made their way to the Free Union. In a fit of rage, Auguslo was said to have destroyed every single article of furniture in his quarters. But he had no choice but to step out for damage control. He wrote Duke Kenmays a letter of apology and admitted his fault in trusting the wrong sort of people. The Fierscale plundering incident was a fatal blow to Auguslo that caused his reputation to suffer greatly. Not only was the new legion he spent so much effort to form completely wiped out, the 11 central provinces didn't have a single imperial force unit remaining, further exacerbating the bandit situation. But now, Auguslo no longer had the means to gather funds and rally more troops. Lorist was quite glad that he managed to give Auguslo a square slap in the face, which he had to take without complaint. Some had noted in the testimonies of the officers that the reasoning for laying hands on the convoy was a shortage in supplies. However, when prompted for why they didn't have enough supplies, the response was always bandit attacks. When further questioned on why they didn't wipe out the bandits that pillaged their supply line, those officers weren't able to come up with anything in response. Auguslo was also at a loss for words. He couldn't acknowledge that the reason Fierscale was stationed in Mesen was to curb the alliance of 4 houses. Even though it was common knowledge, bringing it to light would only make it awkward for everyone. So, he didn't pay the 30,000 captive soldiers of Fierscale any heed, as if the legion had never existed. Lorist wouldn't feed those parasites for nothing either, so he sent them to the newly established Montside to serve as laborers. Chapter 581 Auguslo's Objection. Your Grace, His Imperial Majesty sent you a letter, reported Genalio as he entered with an intricate, pale yellow envelope. Open it and let's see what our Emperor is going to say this time. Lorist was currently quite preoccupied with something else. Since Genalio was his 3rd disciple, he had Lorist's trust and was allowed to deal with such matters. It was currently tea time and Lorist was lying on a mat on the ground beneath a small pavilion in his garden. His 2 youngest children, Jade Bins and Roliners, were crawling all over his body. The 2 children were roughly born around the same time. One of them was Sylvia's youngest child and the other was Daisy's. The 2 of them were nearing the age of 3 and they were treating Lorist like a big, living toy, climbing all over him and tripping from time to time with joy. To prevent displeasing the 2 little fellas, Lorist had no choice but to lay on the ground unmoving with a grim expression. He had to push the kids apart from time to time to prevent themselves from getting into a fight from overexcitement. Usually during tea time, Lorist would gather with his family and play around with his children. But when the women mentioned the new clothes that just arrived in stores for the autumn season, they all left their children to Lorist and swarmed to the markets. Lorist had his hands full looking after his children. Fortunately, some of his elder children had to leave after tea time to receive lessons from their tutors, leaving behind the 2 energetic toddlers and a depressed Anderbale standing in a horse stance. Though he was supposed to attend 2 periods of additional vocabulary class, he slipped away when his tutor's attention slipped and used a stick to knock on a hornet's nest which he discovered in the garden. Had the leader of the guards, Pat, not passed through at that moment, Anderbale would definitely end up with swelling stings all over him. When Pat brought Anderbale over, the tutor happened to be telling on him to Lorist. Lorist really couldn't deal with Anderbale. He tried corporal punishment and good old chiding, but the bear of a child stubbornly refused to change. In the end, he resorted to punishing him by getting him to get into the horse stance. Your Grace, His Imperial Majesty mentioned 2 things. The first concerns the Fierscale plundering incident in Mesen. He hinted at the scandal being a trap we set for him and asked us to not go too far and pursue the matter any longer since we obviously benefited from it. Lorist snorted twice and said, after all that, he's regretting it now? If he knew this was how it'd end up, why bother starting in the first place? If he didn't try to block our front door, why would we plot against him? He's not doing what he should and is paying pointless attention to our house, completely forgetting who saved him from Follic Plains in the first place. When it suits him, he'd come groveling to us and begging for our help, but when he no longer needs us, he tosses us away like a used rag. I more or less understand that he's a disloyal dog who sits when there's something in it for him and barks when there's not. Just ignore him. He's accusing us without any evidence anyway. Salt Merchant Committee sends out its convoys during the 4th and 9th months every year, and the nobles were waiting to engage in their usual trade. It's Fearscale's own fault for causing public outrage by preying on such a high-profile target. If the fish didn't bite the bait, how would we even get a hook on it in the first place? Lorist moved the snotty Jadebins off him and wanted to get a piece of cloth to wipe his face. But Jadebins simply rubbed his face on Lorist's pants. In fear of hurting him by pulling away, Lorist had no choice but to endure. He'd just have to change into another pair of pants. What's the second thing? Asked Lorist. Oh, His Imperial Majesty objects to the monopolization of the fishing catch in the whole of Egret Lake by Iron Guard. He demands us to retreat to the center of the lake and not cross the middle line, and also for us to not use the bank of the lake as a training ground for our cannons. The year was going really sourly for Auguslo. Not only did the scandal with Fearscale flare up, Wittelian, which he stationed in Welbisha and Ungeschendler's border, as well as House Norton's Iron Guard, which was stationed at Egret Lake, displeased Auguslo greatly. He found himself in quite a difficult position, as he didn't expect Wittelian to get along so well with Iron Guard. Back then, Auguslo had agreed to Lorist's request to send a legion of troops to Malivia to aid House Norton against the trade union as a reserve force. Based on Auguslo's 3-year experience fighting the bloody battles in Follic Plains, he believed that the legion would be used as enemy fodder. There was a good chance that House Norton wouldn't be able to resist the assault of the trade union and use that legion to shield their own forces during their retreat. At least, that was how Auguslo envisioned it. That was something he'd do if he was in that position. That was why when he returned to the imperial capital, he restructured the 2 legions under his control and shifted all the elite troops into the Royal Guard. Even the general of Wittelian, Ripolid, was moved to the Royal Guard to serve as general. Those that remained were knights that Auguslo didn't quite like for a variety of reasons, like not willing to swear unconditional loyalty to him, so he stuffed them all in Wittelian and sent them to Malivia. In fact, Auguslo had practically given up on the entire legion. The newly appointed general of Wittelian, Sybek, was a famous 3-star gold-ranked knight in Andanak who had pledged loyalty to Auguslo's father, the 3rd prince. After the 3rd prince's death, he wasn't regarded highly by Auguslo because he opposed one of his guerrilla plans during the Civil War. That marked the start of their cold relationship. Even when Auguslo was leading his 300,000-strong army to attack the trade union, Sybek only ever took the position of colonel or division sergeant major without ever being given a chance to take the helm. However, during the bloody battles in Follic Plains, Sybek saved Auguslo's life once. That time, Auguslo was situated too far at the front lines as he was inspecting the enemy encampments when 2 trade union blade masters attacked all of a sudden. Fortunately, Sybek happened to be passing through during a patrol. Otherwise, it would have been truly dangerous for Auguslo. The enemies were 2 rank 2 blade masters, and even if Auguslo's own blade master bodyguard could barely take on one, Auguslo wouldn't be able to fend off the other. Now that Sybek had finally saved Auguslo's life, he began to catch his attention. However, given his straightforward personality that prompted him to say what he thought, he didn't give Auguslo any special care or respect. Naturally, Auguslo soon gave up on Sybek for his lack of sensibility. It was already quite surprising that he was even appointed the general of Wittelian. Even though Sybek was a rather straightforward person, he was no fool. He knew why he was appointed to be Whitelian's general, but as a traditional royal family knight, he agreed to his assignment and started to reform his legion. He worked hard with his own troops and soon won their loyalty, managing to gain a thorough grasp on the legion. Being sent to help the Norton forces out, Siebeck understood his position and obediently followed any orders the Nortons gave them. The Nortons were quite satisfied with his cooperation and didn't neglect giving him some benefits as well, such as subsidizing some of their rations and giving a part of the supplies they obtained from the trade union. They even received some magic beast jerky that was shipped all the way from the Northlands. In the end, Whitelion's troops had a better time at the front lines than the Royal Guard in the imperial capital. That was especially the case given how they returned with lots of spoils after 2 raids in trade union territories with the Nortons. Not only could they switch out the cruddy bronze armor given to them by Augustlo for cutting-edge mithril armor of the trade union, the soldiers of Whitelion also earned quite a lot of coin for themselves. Siebeck greatly appreciated the Norton system of spoil distribution. It didn't have anything to do with who raided faster. Instead, the units received an amount of the spoils proportional to their contributions. There was a specialized unit that dealt with the pillaging, before an inventory of all the spoils was made for them to be appropriately distributed. Each soldier's due was accounted for clearly. Whitelion also received similar treatment as the Norton troops without any discrimination, filling each soldier in their ranks with gratitude. Under such circumstances, Augustlo's intent on causing trouble for the alliance of 4 houses by stationed Whitelion in Welbisha and Ungeschendler's border had the opposite effect. When Salt Merchant Committee sent a convoy to the imperial capital during the 8th month, Whitelion had requested a high toll price of 1 small silver per person. The convoy paid a total of 40 or so gold coins for the 4,000 plus people and about 100 in total for the whole convoy. However, after paying that sum, the convoy increased the prices of their goods by 20% of the imperial capital, causing Augustlo to be secretly cursed by the citizens, who attributed the rise in prices to the greed of the emperor, much to Kenmaze's delight. By paying a small sum of 100 or so gold coins, he managed to earn a few thousand more in profits. During the beginning of the 10th month, the scandal regarding Fierce Gale spread to the imperial capital and everyone believed the rumor when they heard it. Some of them even believed that the one behind the incident was none other than Augustlo himself, given that the emperor had formerly established his greed with the populace. The last time, it was his collection of a toll that caused prices of goods to rise. So there was hardly anything surprising about him orchestrating the plundering of the trade convoy. After hearing the rumors, Augustlo ransacked his bedroom once more. He only wanted to cause the alliance of 4 houses some trouble so that he would have better bargaining chips with Loras to get something out of House Norton instead of antagonizing them fully. He was well aware that he couldn't match House Norton in terms of might, nor did he want to force Loras to revolt. All he wanted was to show off his might as the emperor to make Loras lower his head slightly. He wanted to let the other nobles in the kingdom understand that even a sword saint wasn't exempt from following the orders of an emperor like him. But how in the world did it devolve to this point? Augustlo still didn't understand it no matter how hard he thought. Though the crimes of Fierce Gale were undeniable, why would they go so far as to plunder Salt Merchant Committee's trading convoy? And even though Whitelion only collected around 100 gold forts as toll from the other convoy, why was the rise in price of goods sold blamed on him? He didn't have anything to do with it. It was dinner time and the main dish of the meal was 2 fishes. They're longtail whitefishes caught from Egret Lake, Augustlo's favorite. Oh? Where did longtail whitefishes this huge come from? Augustlo didn't remember asking anyone to catch any for him. Your Imperial Majesty, they're gifts from Whitelion. There are 14 in total and they're being kept in the live well. They're incredibly fresh, replied a butler respectfully. Whitelion. Are they fishing at Egret Lake? Asked Augustlo. No. It seems that the fishes were given by House Norton's Iron Guard Legion. Apart from the 14 given to your Imperial Majesty, there are tens of carriages of them being sold in the city. They were cleared out completely in around 2 hours. The Whitelion soldiers said that they would be bringing in another batch from Iron Guard tomorrow to be sold, replied the butler. What's going on here? Has my Whitelion Legion turned into fishmongers? thought Auguslo angrily as he ate the fish and resolved himself to visit the Legion tomorrow to find out what in the world was going on. Early the next morning, Auguslo travelled lightly and only brought a squad of Imperial Guards with him to Whitelion's encampment in Welbisha. On the way, they encountered Whitelian soldiers escorting 4 carriages of fish, seemingly towards the Imperial capital. Though Auguslo had wanted to stop them to ask about it, the soldiers didn't pay any attention and continued to travel at full speed, as if the fishes within the carriages were more important than anything else. After all, dead fish didn't sell as good as live ones. Though filled with rage, he didn't bother to chase the fish escorting soldiers down. He decided to deal with it when he arrived at camp. But when he finally arrived in the afternoon, his temper flared once more. "Where's everyone? This camp is practically empty, save for a few people walking around." Fortunately, the gates were still mained. Auguslo angrily asked where everyone had gone and received an answer he didn't expect: "They went working." "Work? What kind of work?" Auguslo felt like he was going to faint. The guard explained in more detail about the job. Firstly, House Norton was rebuilding Lichtana Citadel and it was going to be a huge project. The uphill path to the citadel and down to Bread Hills were included within the scope of construction. Most of the Whitelian soldiers went to help construct the citadel and were paid on a daily basis. They were also provided with 2 meals daily and were allowed to drink ale. The other one concerned helping Iron Guard with the fishing at Egret Lake. The guard mentioned that the lake was covered almost entirely in sails. The soldiers were also paid on a daily basis and if they did well, they were also allowed to take a fish or 2 back for dinner. Currently, Sybek was negotiating with Iron Guard because he felt that the share of 10% of the catch Whitelian was getting was a little unfair. He hoped that it could be raised to 3/10, but the stingy general of Iron Guard, Els, didn't agree. The generals have been arguing about the matter for the past 2 days. Soldiers not intending to work could in turn purchase fish from Iron Guard to sell them in the various towns, but they would bear any risk by themselves. It was said that it sold rather well in the imperial capital yesterday, so they made off around 3 in the morning for another run. The guard said that if he wasn't on duty today, he would have joined in with them to share the profits. Ridiculous! How could they do this? How could they work for House Norton? It seemed that the soldier standing guard didn't know that the elegantly dressed noble before him was the emperor himself. He rambled on and complained that they were only paid 1 month's salary in the past 3, making them unable to feed their families well without doing any extra work. He also mentioned that if he weren't a soldier of Whitelian, he would want to move to the Northlands for a new career. Auguslo blushed with embarrassment. He knew about the shortage of compensation for Whitelian. Initially, he wanted to get Whitelian to collect toll from passing trading convoys to make up for the lack, but so far, they've only collected toll from Salt Merchant Committee once. Other trading guilds shifted their routes to the sea to dock at Gillen Harbour. Come to think of it, using 100 gold fords to make up for 3 months of payment was really laughable. It was no wonder the soldiers went to find work. Auguslo then asked why Whitelian themselves didn't group together to fish for themselves. The guard replied that firstly, they had come upon the idea too late. It was only after the soldiers of Iron Guard set sail in their fishing boats did Whitelian understand their purpose. Additionally, the side of the lake Iron Guard was on was filled with boats while not a single person dared to sail on Whitelian's side. That was because the boats of Iron Guard had cannons installed on them and used the lake as their training ground. From time to time, they would fire their cannons, so nobody dared to stay near the side of Whitelian, to say no more of preparing to sail there. Flipping out in rage, Auguslo couldn't resist writing a letter of complaint to Lorist. Currently, all he wanted was to be given a cut of the fishing operation at Egret Lake. That way, he would at least be able to earn around 100,000 gold fords in a year. Chapter 582 Huge Blunder. It was said that Auguslo's blunder at the encampment of Whitelian became a huge joke. The incident stemmed from his deep dissatisfaction with the current state of the Legion. He had intended to teach them a lesson. First, he rebuked Sibek, who had rushed back quickly after hearing the news, harshly, and had him wait for his punishment while he blew the horn to gather the soldiers who had left to work. But after 3 blows, only tens of Whitelian soldiers returned lazily after half an hour while complaining about some of them blowing the horn for no good reason and interrupting their earning a living for their families. Auguslo, greatly enraged, barked at the 10+ soldiers and had them scram immediately. As one of the 2 main legions of the empire, the Whitelian soldiers and their family members enjoy certain tax benefits that the commoners don't. Auguslo had taken a page out of House Norton's book for that. Even though he couldn't afford to give identical benefits the Nortons gave their troops, decreasing some taxes and giving the families of the soldiers some extra care were within his capabilities. So, those 2 legions were easily able to attract lots of applicants. Auguslo believed that firing the 10+ soldiers was a harsh punishment. Had it not been for the fact that most soldiers had gone to do a part-time job, Auguslo would have wanted to kill them outright. But given the sheer number of people he was dealing with, that wouldn't be an appropriate punishment, and the soldiers who went to work might be aggravated into revolt. After some thought, Auguslo decided to fire them from the legion and take back the benefits it afforded them. He was almost certain that the soldiers would regret right away before begging and groveling to be forgiven. However, the soldiers couldn't be happier to leave. Great! I can leave with my wife and children for Chandler immediately. Yeah, I want to go too. My dad was grumbling that I shouldn't have joined the army in the first place. Our neighbors left for Chandler already, and not only did they get farmland and houses, they also managed to secure a good living at the factories. They're earning around 10 gold fords yearly. That's great. Let's there together. I want to tell my family the good news first. Auguslo was completely speechless. Seeing the fired soldiers leave the camp happily instead of crying and begging felt off somehow. Just as he was pondering the matter, more soldiers returned to camp from work. The moment they heard that some soldiers were fired and kicked out of the legion, the envious looks in their eyes couldn't be more apparent. They all swarmed to Auguslo and said, "Your Majesty, we violated military law as well. Please discharge also." Troubled, Auguslo pointed at the soldiers preparing to leave and cried, "Wait, before you leave, remove your equipment and armor. That's property of the military. You can't take them with you." He didn't expect the soldiers to reply, "We bought these ourselves. They're private property and have nothing to do with the military." Bullshit. These are specially made mithril armor. Each set cost 40+ gold fords at least. How could those poor hicks afford it? However, Auguslo immediately wondered, wait, since when did I provide mithril armor that good to Whitelian? Most of the 50,000 pieces of armor Lorist donated to Whitelian back then formerly belonged to Whitelian in the first place. They were mostly ruined after many battles, with only around 10,000 pieces remaining. Auguslo reclaimed them for use with the Imperial Guard. During the reformation of the 2 legions a few years ago, Auguslo recalled giving mostly cruddy old leather armor to Whitelian. There were less than 1,000 sets of metal armor which were harvested from corpses and weren't maintained. Yet, the armor worn by the Whitelian soldiers were of mithril make. Auguslo felt that the legion had almost changed completely. He looked closely and noticed that it was an elite legion that seemed even more disciplined and capable than the Imperial Guard he so painstakingly formed. Other things aside, the soldiers that returned to camp were decked out in complete gear and well disciplined. They quickly formed together into many orderly square formations and appeared rather menacing. "Your Imperial Majesty, the armor they are wearing are indeed their personal property. They spent their own money to buy them. Nobody was willing to wear the leather armor we provided given the quality and weak defense capabilities, so the soldiers spent their own money to buy those equipment. Right now, the equipment owned by the Legion are mostly stored within the storehouses. There are inventories that take account of them," said Sibek, who was just reprimanded not long ago. How could that be possible?" Auguslo pointed oddly at the battle formations. "There are around 50,000 troops here. They earn only around 2 gold fords per year and wouldn't be able to afford metal armor like that without saving for at least 20 years. How could they find the money to buy so many pieces of equipment that matched together? It is true, Your Imperial Majesty, Siebeck said a little troubledly. Back during the Battle of Blueck, when House Norton defeated the Trade Union Forces army of 200,000, many of their soldiers were captured and these equipment were basically stripped from the prisoners. Since the Norton forces don't see much point in using them, they sold them to our soldiers in Whitellian for cheap. How cheap? Perhaps we can also. Auguslo looked rather interested. If House Norton doesn't want them, they can sell it to me. I might be able to get some free food and supplies from them too. Siebeck shook his head awkwardly. Your Imperial Majesty, back then, I also wanted to buy some equipment on behalf of the Legion. However, House Norton refused to sell to our Legion, but said that the soldiers could spend their own money to buy them. That way, they can take the gear back home when they retire as a sort of benefit for them. As that armor may be the difference between life or death on the battlefield, and our soldiers' spoils and bonuses happen to be distributed, almost all the soldiers bought a set. I heard that the cheapest ones sold for around 8 large silvers. Auguslo's teeth were grit so hard that he didn't realize blood was coming out. 8 large silvers? That's dirt cheap. 1 gold ford was worth 20 large silvers, and mithril armor like that was usually worth more than 40 gold fords. How could they have sold for so cheap? How could they have ended up in the hands of the Whitellian soldiers? House Norton. Do they still have any armor from captives for sale? I'll pay, 2 gold fords per set. Auguslo's eyes were bloodshot with his nose bulging. Who wouldn't take advantage of that kind of deal? 2 gold fords was a far better price than 8 large silvers anyway, and he felt that the price he offered was really appropriate. However, Siebeck's reply completely extinguished his flaring expectations. They're long gone, Your Imperial Majesty. Apart from the ones our soldiers bought, a part of the equipment was given to the newly formed defense forces of the Free Union. The remainder had been sold to the 4 restored nations in Folic Plains for a 30% discount. Each set was sold for the rough price of 30 gold fords. Auguslo was both disappointed and angry. House Norton is obviously trying to mess with me. They actually sold such good armor to my soldiers for such a cheap price. Are they trying to butter up to them? Auguslo had already forgotten how he consigned them to their fates as enemy fodder in the first place. He also conveniently forgot about the rations and payment he owed Whitellian. In his eyes were nothing but the armor worn by the Whitellian soldiers as well as the fine weapons they were carrying. No nation on Grindia would forbid their members from buying their own weapons to use. Not only would that allow them to use the weapons they were most familiar with to achieve their full potential on the battlefield, that would also serve to decrease the burden on the military budget. In fact, they couldn't want anything more than getting the troops to use their own weapons. Whitellian was the perfect example of such a case. Auguslo drooled as he saw the weapons and armor the Whitellian soldiers bought for themselves, but he had no reason whatsoever to claim the weapons that belonged to the individual soldiers. After much consideration, Auguslo made a tough decision. Siebeck, I'm going to use the high price of 5 gold fords to purchase each set of armor and weapons. Order them to remove their armor and discard their weapons for collection now. I will pay them the coins at a later date. That's impossible. Siebeck refused the order almost immediately. The condescending glare he shot him cut ever so deep and discomforted Auguslo greatly. Nobody's a fool, Your Imperial Majesty. If this order is announced, the whole legion will explode with rage. Even if you're the Emperor, you can't use such a low price to purchase the personal property of the troops. Such a low price? Didn't you say that they got them for a steal? 5 gold fords is almost 10 times the amount they bought it for. People can't be too greedy, General Siebeck. Snapped Auguslo out of embarrassment and anger. These are the things the soldiers used to survive on the battlefield. Back then, Salt Merchant Committee wanted to buy them for 35 gold fords a set, yet none of them were willing to sell. Many of the soldiers are going to pass them on through their families as heirlooms. So I seriously don't understand why your Imperial Majesty thinks that 5 gold fords is enough for a set of armor and weapons. Does your Imperial Majesty think that 1 gold ford can be used as 10? Sibek didn't bother with courtesy and spoke his mind without reservation. Auguslo's face flushed red again, but he wasn't able to get angry no matter what. Fortunately, he hadn't given the order just now. Otherwise, the soldiers might just revolt. Though Salt Merchant Committee had offered 35 gold coins to buy each set, the soldiers of Wit-Elian didn't take the deal. If Auguslo ordered them to sell them at 5 gold fords, he would end up a huge laughingstock once more should word of that spread. His reputation of greediness would only be reinforced. Actually, Auguslo had a good eye for the equipment and he could tell that each set of armor was in fact worth more than 40 gold fords. If the pikes, shields and swords were included together, the price would go as high as 50, especially when the design and make of the equipment were of the same series. If sold in bulk, perhaps the price might even rise 10 or 20%. After all, getting armor of completely similar design wasn't an easy task. It was House Norton's invention of water-powered machines that greatly decreased the demand for manpower in the production of large quantities of weapons and armor. But due to the blade masters that were sent to assassinate Lorist in the Northlands, the designs of the machines were leaked. Following that, the trade union rebuilt the exterminated Wesha, that used to be known for their forging, to fashion their own water-powered machines. Only then could large numbers of mithril armor and weapons be made for the trade union forces. As General Sibek said, the weapons and armor were indeed what the soldiers of Wit-Elian were counting on to survive. Even though the world of Grindia was one of battle force, with silver ranks and above being able to manifest threatening blade glows, set of good mithril armor was still the best way to ensure their safety when facing the enemy. For instance, people without battle force wouldn't be able to pierce the mithril armor no matter how great their weapons, and enemies of iron or bronze rank would at best be able to wound mithril armor wearing soldiers without actually killing them. As for silver ranks and above who could use blade glows, they might run out of battle force after facing around 100 enemies wearing only leather armor. However, when faced with soldiers clad in mithril armor, they would only be able to take on around 10 enemies before running out, as the mithril would serve to drain away much of the energy of the battle force and the blade glow. Currently, Auguslo found himself in a rather troubled spot. He wasn't able to find a good way to step down. First, he had wanted to strip the leaving soldiers of their personal property in quite a hasty blunder. After that, he wanted to buy the equipment of the soldiers for a cheap price, only for that notion to be shot down by Sibek. He now hung in a position that couldn't be more awkward. Inwardly, Auguslo felt a huge tantrum brewing. He really wanted to bark at the soldiers who went part-timing for House Norton, but the joyful departure of the tens of soldiers had given Auguslo a strong reminder perhaps the soldiers just couldn't wait to leave. He didn't exactly have a good reason to chide his troops either, as it was the lack of payment that caused them to go seek out other employment opportunities in the first place. Looking at the troops that stood in neat formation, Auguslo felt an oncoming headache. He really wanted to completely kick them out and reform the whole legion. That way, the soldiers that would stand before him after that would all have poor equipment. But no matter how friendly Wit-Elian was with House Norton, he had to admit that the legion that stood in front of him was nothing short of elite. If they were disbanded, there wouldn't be a doubt that they would fall in with the Nortons. Wasn't that just making trouble for himself? Perhaps the Nortons would be able to form another legion from the soldiers who just lost their jobs. No matter how he chose to deal with them, Wit-Elian would prove to be a huge problem. It was obvious that letting them stay in Southern was no longer acceptable. They were going to do nothing but fish for the Nortons and help them fill their labor needs. After much consideration, Auguslo finally thought of a solution. He gave Sibek the order for the troops to be relocated to the central provinces for the extermination of bandits. This time, they would do that for real instead of block the trade routes of the four houses. His Imperial Majesty left just like that after the order without dealing with Wittelian in any other way, was what was included in Elsa's report. General Siebeck sends his regards and requests for Wittelian to be allowed to go through Jungchandler and Egret Swamp to head to the central provinces for bandit extermination. General Els also asks if our house be participating as well, reported Janalio. Jungchandler was a territory under Norton control, so Wittelian, a legion belonging to the imperial family, had to first apply to be let through. If Lorist refused, the legion would have to travel south through Bad Alger and Frederica, which was a huge detour that almost doubled the distance they required to travel. Lorist rapped the desk with his fingers. After a while, he nodded. Of course we'll let them pass. Wittelian is a friend of our house. We will be more than willing to help. However, send Els an eagle message to tell General Siebeck this: it's already the end of the 11th month, so if Wittelian is willing we can bring the legion to the central provinces during winter from the 12th to 1st month next year on sleds. That would spare them the need of traveling a long distance in the mud after the rainy season. All right, I'll notify Lord Els about it, Janalio said. Is your grace going to respond to the letter His Imperial Majesty sent? It has been more than a month since it was received. Ha 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 ha. Lorist cackled heartily. Forget that letter. Let's pretend we didn't receive it. I just hope that His Imperial Majesty will grow wiser after these two incidents and stop ogling us with his greedy eyes in hopes of getting free stuff he doesn't deserve. What he really needs to do is to manage his empire properly and ensure the living standards of the people and the functioning of his administration instead of threatening others with force to get what he wants. Chapter 583 The Obstructive Andalo Merchant Guild. Time passed really quickly and soon, it was the 7th month of year 1785. Your Grace, Wittelian spent 3 months to wipe out the bandits within Westwood and they are on their way to Fapsia next. What's surprising is that His Imperial Majesty started to properly supply the Legion after the new year and no longer owe them any payments. Wittelian's morale is high now and they're fully confident that they'll be able to get rid of the bandits, read Janalio from a secret report sent from the central provinces. Lorist shook his head slightly. Wittelian is going to have it tough soon. Siebeck will not be able to take care of the bandits in Fapsia. Why does your grace think so? Asked Janalio curiously. It's simple, Lorist said before he pointed at the map of the central area hanging from a wall. Among the 11 central provinces, apart from the territories of Dukes Handra, Forand, and Chizan, Westwood is the least infested with bandits given that it's located between those 3 provinces. Wittelian made the correct first step and didn't let us down after we sent them there during the winter. Yet, they took 3 months for Westwood alone. That is also taking into account that the 3 dukes helped to seal off exit from the province using their respective household forces, leaving the bandits no way to escape and allowing for complete extermination. The current state of Wittelian makes it a heavy armored legion. It doesn't have enough mobility and can't match the bandits in terms of speed. Instead, they are hugely disadvantaged in a pursuit. Fapsia used to be the territory of Duke Farkle, but during his resistance to our emperor's conquest, he chose to burn down the capital of his province, Friemux, and left for the trade union after he lost. His current whereabouts are unknown. Even though Farkle's burning of Friemux allowed our house to take advantage of the migrants, Lowe's had to raze down the territories of the landed nobles there to procure the food the refugees needed. Some of the nobles and knights that weren't captured are still unaccounted for. That's why the bandit crisis in Fapsia is the most serious. It is also the source of the farmers' revolt in the central provinces. Apart from some logistical support from Chizan, there's nothing else we can do to help Wittelian when they're in Fapsia. The immobile legion will have a long and grueling time ahead of them given how the bandits can simply outrun and evacuate the troops. I don't think the legion has any initiative in this battle at all. I understand now, Your Grace. So a heavy armored infantry legion like Wittelian isn't much use for the extermination of bandits in a whole area. A highly mobile cavalry legion like Jaeger and the Guard Brigade would be a far better choice, right? As long as they set their sights on the bandits, there's no way they can escape. Lorist nodded praiseworthily. Not bad. The Guard Brigade is an elite force that can head the extermination of the bandits, and a light cavalry unit like Jaeger can set up the defense perimeter and scout around. Whenever they find that the bandits are escaping elsewhere, they can give chase until the bandits have nowhere else to run. Either way, a defense perimeter will still have to be set up to prevent any of the bandits from slipping away and allowing the problem to spread. Genalio had been with Lorist for quite some time. Lorist was quite happy with his third disciple and taught him much in every facet he could. The only thing he found fault with Genalio was his pacifism. Genalio had always been avoidant of fighting others, and he could be said to be the one with the least talent for battle among Lorist's 3 disciples. During the latter part of last year in the 10th month, Genalio only just started learning the Dan Ocean key refining technique from Reedy 3 years later than Howard. Your Grace, here's a report Viscount Camorra sent. The report was written by Baron Fenston, Gillen Harbour's security chief, and it states that since the 4th month of this year, nobles and trading fleets visiting the harbour have declined in number. This year's number is estimated to be less than half of last year's. Baron Fenston had conducted much research into the matter and discovered that Anglo Merchant Guild had set up a large trading point at Floater Creek. Many of the traders stopped there instead. Baron Fenston hopes that our house will come up with a countermeasure for that. The formation of the market at Gillen Harbour was an outlet Lorist used to sell the products and ores produced by the nobles in the northwestern area. There were 31 provinces in the Christian Empire, and the lands were vast with rich resources. Apart from the goods House Norton purchased to be resold and the ones they produced, the other goods would be transported to Moronti and sold there. One such trip would double the revenue easily, and around 2 million gold fords could be made per annum. Even though he had to split half the profits with Auguslo, the million ford income was a reasonable amount for the house. More importantly, those imperial nobles were able to sell their goods through that channel too and earn some amount of money to be able to afford the luxury goods House Norton produced. The formation of the market at the harbour was good news for Auguslo, House Norton, the imperial nobles and the poor folk of Gillen Harbour. But now, somebody lost to temptation and began to reach out for that delicious piece of cheese, and that was none other than the illegitimate son of Auguslo, Wexes. What's he thinking? Does he really have that much capital to found a trading point just like that? If they were going to sell their gods at Moronti as well, Lorist could write the Free Union a letter to cause them trouble and squash them like the ants they were. After all, the maritime trade route belonged to the Nortons, so Anglo would have no choice but to use the land route, which was easily much more expensive. Is there any word from Tarkle? Asked Lorist. Affairs concerning the interests of House Norton would be investigated by Fury Bear at first notice to gain a proper grasp on the situation. What do the reports say? Yes, Your Grace. This is Sir Tarkle's investigation report, said Genalio as he took out a thick folder. What does it say? During the New Year celebration last year held at the Imperial Palace, Count Wexes introduced the main investor of Anglo formally. It's said that he is the successor of a merchant guild from the Roman Empire that had already been exterminated. His name is Selic, and he is preparing to restart his career in the Christian Empire, so he joined hands with Count Wexes to found Anglo Merchant Guild. But due to the Count, the situation of Anglo doesn't seem optimistic. Probably as a token of apology, Count Wexes introduced Selic to the Emperor. According to Selic, his family offended a powerful duke in the Roman Empire and caused the downfall of the trading guild. Selic also suffered a huge injury during his escape and has 2 long scars on his face. So, he would often dress in a black robe and doesn't like to show his face. However, Selic's troubles weren't in vain, as he managed to catch the attention of his pursuers to allow for most of his assets to be transferred out of Roman. He even managed to help a bunch of loyal subordinates to escape. Sir Tarkle has sent 2 informants to the Roman Empire to find out more about Selic, but they would take at least half a year before a conclusion can be reached. During the celebration, His Imperial Majesty showed admiration for Selic's talent and chatted with him personally for more than 3 hours. It's also rumored that Seluk was even offered a chance to serve as well as a title. However, Seluk refused His Imperial Majesty's request on grounds of his crippled and wounded body, which the Emperor expressed great regret for. After the rainy season, Seluk guided Andlu in the founding of a large trading point in Floater Creek and promoted it aggressively. As the prices they purchased goods at are similar to the prices of Jilin Harbour, many landed nobles traded their household products to Andlu to avoid the trouble of travelling so far or to curry favour with Count Wexes. In terms of funding, our informants have ascertained that Andlu received financial backing from the Emperor. There is proof that His Imperial Majesty allocated around 800,000 gold forts to Andlu. As for the traders mostly stopping at the trading point, our house has written a letter of objection to His Imperial Majesty, but the reply we got was that this is normal competition in trade and the Imperial House has no right to meddle in it. The target of trading of the goods purchased from the nobles on the other hand isn't Moronti. Instead, Andlu sends out trade convoys to the trade union. Our informants aren't sure what sort of relationship Andlu has with the trade union, but they've all heard Seluk said one thing. Merchants have always strived for profit. Even an enemy or the devil himself is my friend and customer if he can bring me profits. Lorist furrowed his brow at the new conundrum. He didn't think that Andlu would have such a talented businessman who not only grabbed Jilin Harbour's business but also obtained Auguslo's support. Most importantly, they managed to circumvent the trade central Lorist forged in Moronti and managed to form a relationship with the trade union. The trade union lacked lots of raw materials and resources, so that trade route was crucial to them. Only then would they stand a chance on growing powerful once more. This is a truly surprising development, Lorist thought with a bitter smile. Who would expect the Chrisan Empire to supply its sworn enemy, the trade union, with resources and raw materials? They also managed to perfectly outmaneuver our house's control. Even the new Peterson kingdom between the trade union and Chrisan Empire won't be able to do anything about this. With the support of the Chrisan Empire, perhaps Peterson could still be able to stop the trade route to the trade union. However, the empire itself was supporting the use of that trade route, so Peterson could only begrudgingly accept the status quo. While he could afford to upset the trade union, King Peterson wouldn't dare to offend the new Chrisan Empire. Even though House Norton had influence there was nothing that could be done. If the trade union partnered up with the Chrisan Empire to deal with them, the newly independent Peterson kingdom would no doubt fall. The sole goal of a merchant's actions was to make profit regardless of whether the customer was friend, foe, or demon. That saying was just like the one Lorist heard in his past life: capitalists would even sell the rope that will be used to hang them. Seluk was a true merchant, and that was the kind of thing Lorist found hard to deal with. Are there any suggested countermeasures in the report? Lorist could only count on sourcing a solution from the others. Many brains were better than one after all. Genalio flipped to the last page of the report and shook his head. Your Grace, Baron Fenston has suggested increasing the purchasing price for the goods by around 10%. But Andlu raised the price to match us right after that, causing most of the traders to stop there instead of Jilin Harbour. Lorist's eyes flashed as he paced around in the room twice. He stopped and said, "Send an eagle message to Jilin Harbour to raise the purchasing price by 30%. If Andlu matches up to us, raise it by 1.5 times. But, Your Grace, we'd have almost no profits like that," Genalio said, startled. If we purchase at such a high price, the profits after we deduct manpower and transportation costs would be negligible. We can only barely break even. Your Grace, this would not just harm them, but ourselves as well. Even if Andlu gets suppressed, we would not be unscathed either. Haha. That's exactly what I want, a Pyrrhic victory. Think about it, Genalio, if we raise the purchasing price and only break even, then Andlu would have to raise their prices as well. But if you take into account the higher cost for transporting on land, which they rely on, do you think they'll have any profits? I think they'll be losing money while we can at least break even. But what if they don't raise their prices to match ours? If they don't, nobody would sell them any goods. Their trading point would fail if that's the case, though there are some who would do barely profitable business, nobody would conduct business that lost money. They will be forced to give up on this trade route because they won't be able to make up to the emperor, their investor. As for our house, we will be able to continue breaking even for 2 to 3 years. The most important thing is for us to stop Andla from trading with the trade union, the enemies of our house. We must always remain alert, and anyone that tries to aid their recovery is going against us. That's why raising the price to match Andla's is the only thing we can do now. Understood, Your Grace. I'll send the message immediately, said Janalio. Chapter 584 Malak's Defenses. Your Grace, Lord Malak and Lord Potterfang are waiting for you in the meeting room, hurried Janalio. All right, let's go. Anderbale, practice the basic sword moves a few more times before going to take a shower. Don't catch a cold now. Loris tapped Anderbale's head with a wooden sword before turning to leave. Anderbale was getting more naughty than ever and didn't like academics. So, Loris had no choice but to start teaching him swordsmanship to ensure that he had a good foundation. Surprisingly, the child showed great talent and keen interest and patience for martial arts. That attitude was a stark contrast to the one he had for studies. He would often slip away to play. Loris spent only 3 days to teach him 28 basic sword moves, causing his pride to swell. He didn't think the bearish child would actually make him proud one day. Potterfang and Malak had come to talk about the defense in Montside. The setting up of the defense lines around the borders of magical Dragon Mountains and the Wild Lines was integral for the safety of the province, but due to the Terranine restrictions, the survey team spent 1 year to discover that the complicated hilly and forested terrain made it really hard for the Norton forces to make a complete defense line to secure Montside's borders. The border separating Montside from magical Dragon Mountains and the Wildlands stretched 236 kilometers long. Even though Firm Rock had 45,000 members, they wouldn't be able to spread themselves across the whole border. They would only be able to station a 100-man unit for each half-kilometer, and not only would they lose the initiative to act, they would also have to rely on others behind them for logistics support. Loris wouldn't allow a main open-field battle legion to be stationed at the border either. But having only 45,000 men securing the border to defend the new citizens of the province was not feasible. The thin defenses only invited attack, and the slightest push would cause the defense line to lose all effect. While the trenches and sentry towers could hold the barbarians off, they might not be able to fend off magic beast attacks. Your Grace, those involved in the survey had a month-long discussion and concluded that if we want to satisfy Your Grace's wish to hold the defense line for the long term without using too many soldiers, the best solution is to dig a man-made river to stop the magic beasts from crossing. It'll also prove to be a good obstacle for the barbarians trying to attack. We'll have enough time to sound the alert and come up with a countermeasure as they cross the river, reported Malak. The map of Montside was laid on the table and a thick, red line could be seen drawn across it. A man-made river. Loris mused with intrigue. Tell me more about the plan. Understood, Your Grace. This river starts north from Azure River and will flow along the border of Montside all the way to Lake Terran Laws in the Black Forests, stretching for about 250 kilometers. We planned for the river to have a width of around 50 meters and a depth of 10. After some surveying by the Ministry of War, we confirmed that the area in the vicinity is suitable to be turned into a man-made river like that. Loris felt a headache coming. He thought they were only going to dig a river around 10 meters wide and 6 meters deep, but he didn't think those of the ministry actually planned to make it 50 meters wide and 10 meters deep. Can this still be considered a river? It's a whole water highway. Malak's voice also sounded a little deep. The scale of the construction was a little too large. It meant that the house would have to invest large amounts of funding to complete. Even Loris couldn't ensure whether the house could finish the project. Malak took out a few designs and showed them to Loris. Those sent to survey the land and the designers of the engineering department made an estimation and found that only a river this wide can properly prevent the magic beasts from attempting to cross the river and wipe out any ambitions the barbarians have. Given the technical prowess of the barbarian military, it would take them at least 3 hours to send 1,000 men over a 50-meter wide river. That's enough time for our forces to call for reinforcements. Malak pointed at the design and said, the designers intend to use the mud unearthed from the construction to make mud bricks, which can be stacked up to form a stair-like embankment, on which sentry and alert towers can be built. That way, we would only require a small number of personnel to keep watch of the border. Both magic beast and barbarian would definitely be noticed if they approach the river. The guards can then warn the others with smoke signals and start attacking the incoming threats from the sentry towers while they waited for reinforcements to arrive. The headache Lorist felt grew more intense. This is not even a water highway. It's the Great Wall. He could see countless gold forts grow wings and fly away as well as Spiel's angered expression. The proposal, however, did seem to be one of the most reliable methods to rid the province of the threat from the barbarians in the magical Dragon Mountains and the magic beasts in the wildlands for good. If there were no natural barriers, they could always build one. That was the train of thought of the designers in the engineering department and the surveyors of the Ministry of War. Fortunately, the river and wall stretched only 250+ kilometers long. Lorist believed that the house would be able to barely afford such an undertaking instead of going bankrupt because of it. After the construction of the embankment and river was completed, it would bring Montside and the house much benefit. Other things aside, Firm Rock could be released from guard duty and taken back to become a main fighting force of the house. Not only that, Montside would be spared from the barbarian and magic beast threat and could even use the river as a transportation facility. That could allow the new desolate province to be developed into a thriving settlement. Pog, do you really think there's a need for such a large project like this? Asked Lorist to the quiet Potter Fang. Your Grace, I really don't know what to say, Potter Fang spoke with an awkward chuckle. Theoretically, I should be against the project because this project will decrease the morale of our forces as it makes us out to be a turtle shirking back into our shell we built for ourselves instead of being courageous enough to face the threat of the barbarians and beasts directly. As it stands, we're going to be passively defending instead of launching counterattacks. But in fact, I can't wait to see this project completed. Though Firm Rock will only have to be stationed here for another year, the casualties we suffered reached more than 1,200 men. These casualties weren't incurred in battles or skirmishes, but rather guerrilla attacks by the barbarian hunters or carnivorous beasts during patrols. And due to the complex terrain, and the lack of experience fighting in the mountains, we aren't able to properly face off against our foes. It's not that our equipment aren't good enough or we lack the will to fight our enemies, but among the 700 or so sacrificed troops, less than 200 died from an actual fight. Most of them lost their lives to poisoned arrows, traps, and encounters with magic beasts. When a squad calls for reinforcements, the enemy will be long gone by the time any arrives. The morale of Firm Rock is a little on the low lately. Our troops are used to facing enemies head-on and won't even fear when they are outnumbered. What the troops aren't used to is the elusive enemy and the high rate of accidents and injuries from patrols. To the troops of Firm Rock, digging the river and building a wall or embankment is a thing that'll raise their spirits. Lorist slapped his forehead. He stationed Firm Rock at the border of Montside because of their reputation for great defense, but he had forgotten that the enemies the Legion wasn't tens of thousands of enemy troops. Instead, they had to man the 250-kilometer-long defense line of Montside and navigate the complex terrain, which weren't easy tasks for them. Had it not been for Potter Fang's report, Lorist would still be unaware of what sort of trouble Firm Rock ran into. Looks like this project must be undertaken. Lorist turned to ask Malak, since the project has been planned, what is the budget and time it will take to complete it? Tell me how many gold forts I'll have to spend. Malak, looking a little embarrassed, said, Your Grace, this project to build the river and embankment is estimated to require 100,000 laborers. At a rate of 50 kilometers per year, it would take 5 years at least. The initial budget is estimated to be around 2 million gold forts each year. House Norton's frequent undertaking of huge development projects made them rather good at estimating costs. Without captives, they would have to recruit laborers from the Dominion, and each youth could earn up to 8 gold forts per year, meaning that 100,000 of them would require around 800,000. Their food, drink, and other bonuses would have to provide it as well, not to mention the tools required for the project, vehicles, tents for accommodation and so on. 2 million each year was a reasonable amount. However, given that the construction site is near magical Dragon Mountains and the Wildlands, we will need to mobilize our forces to keep the project safe. The house needs to deploy around 3 main legions to push the border 15 kilometers further and hold absolute control in that area. Only then can we ensure absolute safety for the construction site. The Ministry of War estimated the costs for each legion to be deployed would require an additional 1 million gold forts annually, said Malak as he closed the folder and concluded the report. Lorist was quite satisfied with the ministry's effectiveness. They had a clear grasp on the spending required for such operations. That way, there would be a clear indication of how much they're expected to spend and the accounts wouldn't end up becoming a mess. Deploying 1 main household legions for only an additional 1 million per year was already rather savvy. The bonuses given to the soldiers, repair and replenishment of used equipment, medical fees for injured soldiers and pension for dead soldiers all amounted to quite a large sum. That was why even though 100,000 workers only had to be paid 2 million gold forts annually, a legion of 45,000 men alone needed 1 million. According to the proposal Malak brought out, the construction project would cost 10 million gold forts and take 5 years and free Montside from the threat of barbarian and beast attacks. House Norton would gain a secure province to rule over, so the huge spending would be justified. The issue was that to ensure the safety of that project, 3 main household legions had to be deployed and would cost 3 million gold forts each year. 5 years would bring that figure up to 15 million gold forts, so the total project would cost a staggering amount of 25 million gold forts. The cost of deploying 3 legions and North Sea Fleet in the war with the trade union in Fallock Plains cost the household an additional 10 million gold forts. But House Norton didn't make a loss from that war and instead managed to establish a trade route to the south of the continent, took control of the Sunshine Seas and Golden Coast, and invest in the reborn market in Moronti. The money earned far eclipsed money spent and it was definitely a profitable war and deal. But the deployment of 3 legions to patrol the border and keep the project safe for the next 5 years added 3 million gold forts to the house's spending annually. The investing of 15 million gold forts for security wouldn't guarantee a return, and the cost might rise depending on how aggressive the conflicts with the mountain barbarians were. As expected, the proposal for the project in Montside was greatly objected to among the House administration. Spiel was the strongest critic of the project, being the man who was stingy with military spending as always. He declared that he'd rather the House form 2 new legions to guard the border of Montside than to agree to go with the project for the province's defense. Lorist had no choice but to hold a meeting among the top household officials to discuss the matter. This time around, one detailed analysis presented by Lorist changed Spiel's attitude towards the project completely. The staunchest objector became the strongest supporter right away. Lorist told him that if such a strong barrier was constructed, it could ensure the safety and stability of Montside for at least 5 decades. In other words, it could be considered an upfront payment for the defense of the province for the next 50 years, which would break down to about 500,000 gold forts per year. Forming 2 new legions to defend Montside on the other hand not only increased the budget by 1 million gold forts on a yearly basis, additional costs would be incurred in the event of large conflicts with the mountain barbarians. The spending in 5 decades would definitely soar above 50 million gold forts. After converting Spiel, the other officials soon achieved a consensus and decided to go forward with the undertaking of titanic proportions. The project was to be presided over by Malak. As such, Lorist jokingly suggested for the defense line formed by the river and the embankment to be known as the Malak Defense Line, but to his surprise, they actually adopted it as its proper name. Chapter 585. Taking a few steps back. The decision that was made on Malak defense line meant that yet another huge matter of the house had been solved and Lorist could finally return to his days of tranquility. As for the whole effort to dig a man-made river and build the embankment as well as the mobilization of 3 main household legions to guard the border of Montside, the Ministry of War and Engineering Department would take care of them. Lorist was quite assured that Malak was appointed as the supervisor of the project. All he did was personally talk to him about the details of mobilization and the schedule. Lorist believed that there would be no need to bring all 3 legions on site at Montside. Only the area being worked on had to be guarded after all. That way, they wouldn't have to guard the whole border. Not only did that save much manpower, the legions could also guard them in shifts. In terms of funding, it would save up to 5 or 6 million gold fords in 5 years. He had no choice but to make such an arrangement as Iron Guard was still busy at Yunj Chandler with the renovation of Lichtana Citadel, which would only be completed by next year. Jaeger was stationed at Wild Husbandry and was the only mobilizable legion of the house. Firm Rock and Tigersaur on the other hand were moved to Montside, leaving only Termin's Rage Bear Knights in the Northlands. They would be the first responders to any emergencies and buy time for the house to come up with a response. Though Lorist believed that there wouldn't be any huge issues in the Dominion, or the Empire, for that matter, for the years to come, the completion of Lichtana Citadel and the relocation of Iron Guard to Montside was the time when the house's forces were at their thinnest. The 3 provinces of Winston, Delamock, and Yunj Chandler could only rely on their newly formed local garrison legions for defense. Hopefully, the wary Auguslo doesn't cause me any trouble during the next few years. Lorist already made up his mind to not mess around with the Emperor and spend his days in peace within the Dominion. No matter what happened within the Empire, as long as it wasn't a threat to the house's interest, Lorist wouldn't show up to solve it. Those responsible for instigating the matters would have to take care of their own s. It was currently the 10th day of the 8th month and Lorist would be traveling with his wife and 4 concubines and children to North Sea before taking the ferry to Platinum Beach for a vacation. That was in tandem with Ken Maze's efforts to restore life to Platinum Beach. It was said that he invited many imperial nobles there to hold an exciting summer party. Little did Lorist expect that he would hear news about Auguslo after just hoping that he wouldn't cause any trouble. Ken Maze sent an urgent letter that Auguslo had accepted the invitation and showed up there. It was said that he wasn't there to join the fun, as stripping down on a beach to play around didn't really fit the image of an emperor. Initially, Auguslo refused to join the festivities using his busy schedule as an excuse, but surprisingly, he changed his mind in 2 days and replied to Ken Maze that he would be going on a vacation as well. So, Ken Maze wrote Lorist an urgent letter to pose the question whether Auguslo had other intentions for going and asked him to be prepared for it. Auguslo's going to Platinum Beach as well? Isn't that like the Emperor wanting to have fun with commoners? I doubt he'd do something that meaningless. I'm sure he should be busy with all sorts of other stuff. How could he be in a mood to have fun? Lorist's eyes rolled, he more or less had a grasp of what was going on. Genalio, inform the matron to bring the 4 concubines and children to Platinum Beach. I won't be joining. If anyone asks, say that I'm busy dealing with a barbarian invasion in Montside. Is your grace intentionally avoiding his imperial majesty? Asked Genalio with shock. The way he saw it, there was no reason to do so. Wasn't that intentionally causing House Norton's reputation too? Lorist could tell right away what Genalio was thinking and gave him a pat on the head. Kid, didn't you read about the secret report we received a few days ago? Ever since Jilin Harbor raised the purchasing price for ores and other raw materials, Andlo was forced to raise theirs as well, but that also means that they'll suffer even larger losses. That young master, Selek, went to see the Emperor a few times possibly to discuss the matter. And now, His Imperial Majesty is coming to Platinum Beach for a vacation. I firmly believe it has something to do with a suggestion for me to lower the purchasing prices at Jilin Harbor so that the both of us don't end up battered. After all, the emperor invested 800,000 gold fords in Andla from behind the scenes. Since it has to do with His Imperial Majesty's investment, he has no choice but to come and settle the matter personally. I don't want to be forced to give face to him and yield to this request, so I've decided to avoid him. Let Andla continue to suffer the loss. Will it really end like that? Asked Genalio doubtfully while scratching his head. Of course, Lorist replied with certainty, the Empire's borders have been rather peaceful as of late and nothing huge worth paying attention to has occurred. Apart from the fact that Wit-Elion is still entangled with the bandits in Fapsia, the only other thing worth paying attention to is our commitment to build Malak defense line. His Imperial Majesty will definitely not allow us to help Wit-Elion out, and there wouldn't be anything anyone can do about Malak defense line. The only thing left must be the raise in purchasing price by our house. His Imperial Majesty made the excuse to go on a vacation to meet with me so that nobody else will make a big fuss out of this. I understand. Since His Imperial Majesty said that the merchants stopping at the new trading point at Floater Creek is part of free market competition, then our house's act of raising the prices is part of that as well. Since His Imperial Majesty and Andla can't do much about that, they have no choice but to come to Your Grace personally to negotiate the matter to prevent a long-term trade war. Even though it has only been a month, Andla is already unable to hold on, so our Emperor decided to come personally for negotiations. And Your Grace is avoiding the meeting because Your Grace wants to extend the trade war. As Your Grace mentioned, House Norton has the advantage of transport by sea, so we can break even or even make a small profit even with the high prices, while Andla has to suffer more losses the more they purchase because they have to pay a huge price for transport to maintain the trade route with the trade union, summarized Genalio with understanding. That's the idea. His Imperial Majesty initially refused the invitation, only to turn around 2 days later. It's obvious that the Emperor wants to use this chance to meet with me and discuss the prices. You know, our Emperor has always loved to consolidate power and is all too busy doing other tasks on a daily basis. If it weren't because of his personal investment in Andlu, he wouldn't be in the mood to go to Platinum Beach for a vacation. I'm guessing that His Imperial Majesty wants to discuss boundaries on who is allowed to sell at which places. For instance, perhaps Jilin Harbor's market could handle sales from the northwestern area of the Empire while Andla can take care of the 2 southwestern provinces. That kind of compromise will help lower prices. It's too bad that the goal of our trade war is not to reach an agreement with Andlu, otherwise those terms would be rather appealing. The reason I don't want to go to Platinum Beach to meet His Imperial Majesty is because I can't be bothered to negotiate the prices. Andlu and His Imperial Majesty's investment is not the most important. What I'm concerned about is cutting off trade to the trade union altogether. For our house, any act that helps the trade union recover must be stopped. Before our Emperor and the person in charge of Andlu, Selak, are aware of that, I refuse to negotiate with Genalio. Write Duke Kenmaze a letter and tell him to receive His Imperial Majesty as usual. Don't need to make any fuss over it. Apologize on my behalf that I won't be able to be there, instructed Lorist. Understood, Your Grace. Though Lorist wasn't going to spend his vacation in Platinum Beach, he still had to send Sylvia and the 4 concubines as well as the children to North Sea for them to take the ferry there. He would have Sylvia deliver the letter of apology to Kenmaze on his behalf. After the ferry left, Lorist turned back to the docks and headed to Nico Academy with Genalio and his guards. He was going to visit many people on this trip of his. First, he would see his lover, Telesty, and the 2 princesses she birthed him. He would also have to visit Diliana's eldest son, Slop Henk. Other than that, he would be bringing Charade's second son, Freelide, to replace Genalio as Lorist's attendant. If he performed well, Lorist might take him as his 4th disciple. However, only 2 days into his visit at the academy, he received a secret report from North Sea that Auguslo had arrived with a light cohort of 100 guards on House Kenmay's trading vessel at North Sea and was on his way to Rage Bear. Looks like he won't rest until he sees me. Guess he decided to come knocking after not seeing me at Platinum Beach. Lorist sent an eagle message to task Charade with handling the emperor and tell him to inform Auguslo that he was in Montside. If Auguslo really went to Montside, Potter Fang, Loz and Malak would inform him that Lorist left urgently to Silauas to deal with a trade conflict. Lorist brought Janalio, Freelide, and his guards to North Sea to take a ferry that was heading to Silauas. Even though the Northlands was the dominion of the Nordens, Lorist couldn't be sure whether Auguslo had spies within it. If it was discovered that he was hiding in Nico Academy and refusing to meet Auguslo, it would turn out really awkward if he was cornered, so he decided to make an actual trip to Silauas and believed that Auguslo wouldn't go so far to chase him down. He was the emperor after all, and it was only custom for the duke to receive the emperor personally instead of playing hide and seek like he did. However, that wouldn't be the case if he really was at Silauas. Lorist couldn't do much to Auguslo since he was an emperor anyway. Auguslo wanted to seek him out for a private chat about trade instead of summoning him officially for a negotiation on prices, as that would be hugely embarrassing for an emperor like him. Surprisingly, Lorist didn't think that Auguslo would be that persistent. After 6 days in Silauas, Lorist received word that Auguslo ordered the people of the house to provide a ship for him to travel to Silauas once he heard that Lorist wasn't there. What kind of person would be that thick-skinned? Lorist felt that he was defeated by Auguslo in some capacity. He's going to meet me no matter what? Since he's being so persistent, I'll go to Mornate. I doubt he'd actually follow me there. The current situation wasn't like when House Norton controlled the city and Auguslo was able to travel there as he wished. Currently, Moronti was the territory of the Free Union and an emperor like Auguslo couldn't travel there with just a light guard. 5 days later, Auguslo arrived at Silauas on the ferry, Whitebird. Governor Hector and Jilin Harbor Chief of Finance Camorra politely welcomed Auguslo and informed him that Lorist had traveled to Moronti to resolve a trade conflict. The matter involved trade with Jigda in the south of the continent. As that would require quite some time, it wasn't certain when Lorist would return to Silauas. It was then when Auguslo knew for sure that Lorist was avoiding him. After staying at Silauas for 5 days, he prepared to leave for the imperial capital. Before he left, he had a deep discussion with Camorra and criticized House Norton's raising of prices was only harming others and themselves and wasn't sustainable in the long run. But Camorra's reply almost caused Auguslo to spew blood in rage. He said that even though the high purchasing prices caused the house to lose a lot of profit, it also resulted in the imperial nobles having more money, and that raised demand for the luxury goods sold at Jilin Harbor. They were more willing to spend even more money to purchase things. In terms of revenue, it rose by 50% compared to the previous year and increased House Norton's profits even more. According to the agreement between Lorist and Auguslo, Jilin Harbor would be given to House Norton for management and a market would be formed there. The profits from that market would be split in two between House Norton and Auguslo. However, the Norton-produced goods were not part of that deal. The deal only applied to profits made from the sale of ores and raw materials purchased from Jilin Harbor. In other words, Auguslo's support of Andla from the background to wrestle trade from Jilin Harbor only harmed his own profits. House Norton was able to earn even more through the sale of their own luxury goods and products and make up for the losses at Jilin Harbor. How could Auguslo remain calm after hearing that news? In the end, he left Silauas in low spirits. Camorra calmly instructed, "Write His Grace an eagle message to inform that His Imperial Majesty has left for the imperial capital. His Grace can come back now." Chapter 586 Auguslo's handwritten letter. How can anyone be so shameless, especially the emperor? He actually treats his word like nothing but a fart. Thought Krillos as he held the written order Auguslo sent him, shaking from the anger. Auguslo just reinforced Krillos's belief that the father and son duo were shameless to the bone. During the 7th month, House Norton raised the prices they were buying goods at Jilin Harbor greatly by up to 30%. Krillos didn't hesitate to get Andla to meet that price. However, House Norton raised it once more, almost doubling the original price. Andla was in a tough position. Krillos was incredibly troubled as purchasing goods at that price not only didn't bring any profits, the more they purchased, the larger the loss. The spending for 1,000-man trading convoy during their travels from the imperial capital to the trade union was no small amount either. Krillos realized that each trip would cost him around 80,000 gold fords. If the prices hadn't been raised, each trip would earn him around 500,000 gold fords. But with the purchasing price doubled, transporting goods worth hundreds of thousands to the trade union wasn't only a loss, they couldn't even make enough to cover the cost of transportation. The expenses of the convoy aside, the convoy had to pay a huge toll while passing through the kingdom of Peterson, much to the heartache of Krillos. Other merchant guilds would just quit the unprofitable business, but that wasn't an option for Krillos. He understood how important resources were to the resuscitation of the trade union. Given how resource-stripped they were, they required the goods Andlu could provide to make their own products and compete in the market. Only with more raw materials and ores could they start fashioning tough armor and sharp weapons. There was one way to resolve that issue, and that was to raise prices of goods sold so that a profit was made nevertheless despite the higher cost. Since the trade union were in urgent need of those resources, they would be willing to pay that price. But Krillos couldn't bring himself to do it as he was aware that it would cause quite a lot of trouble for Duke Koblight. The various factions in the trade union would start pestering him with problems. After all, the current trade union was no longer the rich and powerful nation it used to be. So, Krillos decided to solve the trade war with House Norton himself and had an audience with Auguslo in hopes that they could bring the ones in charge of trade of House Norton to negotiate. The best way to resolve the issue was trading in separate areas. Jilin Harbor and Andlu would do their business in their respective provinces without interfering with one another. That way, everyone could make profit. It was a win-win solution. Krillos believed that Auguslo would help mediate the matter with House Norton, and that the house would go along with the emperor's demands to save him face. Given that Auguslo had a 800,000 gold ford stake in Andlu, he would also side with the guild more and try to get some benefits out of the negotiations. However, Krillos didn't think that Auguslo would take matters into his own hands instead of holding a joint negotiation. Confidently, he told Krillos, "It's but a small matter. Let me handle it for you. I only need to meet Lorist and talk to solve the issue." Lorist was the head of House Norton and Duke of the Northlands, as well as the Imperial Sword Saint. Krillos knew him as the trade union's greatest foe and the one that caused its demise. However, he was quite curious why Auguslo was so confident about resolving the issue. Auguslo gleefully told Krillos that even though Lorist was a sword saint, he had his own weaknesses, his weak will and penchant for reputation. Even though Lorist had a rather tumultuous history with him, as long as they met and he lay down his poise as emperor and had a heart-to-heart talk with him, Lorist would give in to any request. The trade war was a smaller matter in comparison. He only had to plead to get Lorist to agree to his terms. Not to mention, the vacation party at Platinum Beach hosted by Duke Kenmaze was the perfect chance, as he heard that Duke Norton would be heading there with his family. Auguslo decided to tell Duke Kenmaze that he would be participating as well so that he could meet Lorist there. That way, he could resolve the matter without making it public and wouldn't feel ashamed about humbling himself as it would be a private conversation. So, Krillos confidently awaited the good news from Auguslo. 1 month later, Auguslo sent an order that he had tried his best, but Duke Norton was nowhere to be found. Though he gave it his all to follow Lorist, the latter was obviously trying to avoid him and even went as far as traveling to Moronti. He also said in the order that he was incredibly angry and humiliated by Duke Norton's avoidant behavior and expressed his hopes that Selleck would help Andlu win the trade war with House Norton, saying that he would support them all the way. However, he did want to remind him that as the construction of the trading point at Floater Creek caused him to lose 1 million gold fords in profit from Jilin Harbor, he said that he would be expecting that amount from Andlu. Other than that, Auguslo emphasized the huge investment he made with Andlu, the 800,000 gold fords he took from the treasury of the imperial family for them to use as capital to purchase the raw materials from nobles. Auguslo believes that if he left that sum to the Nortons to manage, earning back millions from that amount would only be expected. So, in light of the guild just being founded in the imperial capital recently, he said that he didn't hope for results the Nortons could provide. Instead, he was only looking forward to a small dividend payment of around 600,000 gold fords. This man's shamelessness knows no bounds. Krillos really wanted to rush into the palace and give Auguslo a slap in the face. On what basis did he think that Andlo should be responsible for the profits he lost at Jilin Harbor? However, Krillos knew that it was an argument he wouldn't win. It was he who had persuaded Auguslo to allow Andlo to start the trading point at Floater Creek for the trading convoys of the imperial nobles in the first place. Had that not happened, Auguslo's yearly profit of 1 million gold fords would still be there. No matter how bad the relationship between the emperor and the duke, he would still receive 1 million gold fords annually. But now, due to Andlo's interference, the prices were doubled and Auguslo proceeded to blame Andlo for the profits he lost. Even though Auguslo supported Andlo in a move to teach House Norton a lesson, that cost him his 1 million gold fords. So, he wasn't afraid of pissing Andlo off, causing Krillos to incur a debt of 1 million gold fords for no reason. Krillos could only begrudgingly shoulder that debt. If the prices weren't doubled, that amount would be no pressure on him at all. However, given the losses Andlo was suffering, that million could well cost the life of the guild. They might have to shut down for good. What the hell is with that 600,000 gold fords of dividend? Investments are risky in the first place. Losses are just as common as profits. It's already the 10th month now, and there are only 2 months left before the end of the year. Where would I get that kind of money for him? At that moment, he was considering whether he should just ditch everything and leave. But considering the price he paid to approach Auguslo and gain his trust, how could he just leave without fulfilling his revenge? Was he going to consider the loss of 1.5 million gold fords by Auguslo payback enough? The thought of the pain Auguslo had caused him made him feel incredibly unwilling about the situation. The door of the study was lightly knocked on. Krillos knew that only his subordinates could knock like that. He kept the order and said, "Come in." The one who entered was the guard on duty. He delivered Krillos a letter which seemed like a normal price inquiry letter. He would receive a few of those daily from the nobles dealing with the guild, but the one in his hand right now had the emblem of a twin-headed dragon. Krillos asked the guard to bring him a glass of milk, which he took a gulp out of before sprinkling all over the letter and baking it above HTE candle fire. Soon, dark blue text appeared on the letter. By the time the letter was completely dry, the text disappeared, but he had already memorized what it said. After some consideration, he instructed, "Prepare the carriage. I want to go out." A week later, Krillos traveled non-stop for Malivia, where a noble manor was built some 10 years ago. It was abandoned after Malivia was taken back by the Empire, but Andlo bought the ruined manor back for a cheap price and renovated it into one of the furthest rest stops for Andlo's men. The week-long trip was quite hard on his weakened body. He flopped around like mud when he was helped off his carriage. After being bathed and bandaged up by his personal maidservants and taking 2 days of rest, Krillos finally recovered a sliver of energy. A day later, a black carriage with no insignia drove into the manor. A black-robed man who dressed quite similarly to Krillos left the carriage. That was the guest Krillos had been waiting for. The guards showed him into the study without bothering to check his identity. When the man removed his robes, Krillos stood up in shock and said, "Your Grace, why have you come?" Nobody expected that the premier of the trade union, Duke Koblight himself, would travel to a normal manor near the border of the Empire's province, Malivia, not even Krillos. "Is this odd? Long time no see, my fellow brother," said Koblight with a relaxed smile as he gave Krillos a hug. He knew about the injuries, so he was very careful with the hug. I thought your Grace would send a representative to talk with me. What prompted your Grace to come personally? Was there a problem with our past transaction?" asked Krillos anxiously. "No, the transaction was fine. Brother, the trade route you forged helped me out greatly. Even though peace has been restored with the mid-southern nations, they're still biased against our union and are putting us down, especially with regards to one of the most crucial resources, mineral ores. Yet, your trade route was able to provide us with exactly what we needed and allow us to slowly recover our forces and equipment. We are also now able to produce some other goods apart from glass. Koblight looked at Krillos and thankfully said, Brother, the union is doing well, don't worry. But why didn't you tell us about the troubles you faced? We only just found out that you are taking losses for the sake of maintaining this trade route. You should have let us know earlier. You know how important this is to us. If you lose this trade war with House Norden, that will spell the end of the trade route. Krillos smiled bitterly. Even though I'm making a loss from the trade route, I don't really mind. I can make it up from endeavors elsewhere. However, this is what I'm having trouble with now. Krillos took out the written order of Auguslo. I've never met someone as shameless as he is, a person who's emperor no less. It was he who encouraged me to cause trouble for House Norden and promised to support Andlo in the first place. But now, he's asking me for money. 1.5 million gold fords. It's a miracle that he's even able to make such a demand. Koblight read the order and smiled after some thought. No worries. I brought you something. Show it to your emperor and I'm sure he'll stop demanding money from you. Chapter 587 The Bird Called Balga. No, your grace. This won't do. How can we give these equipment and weapons to that guy? Wouldn't that be increasing his strength? I'm definitely against it. Koblight was talking about a large chest in which a set of fine, black metal armor could be seen. There was also a rectangular shield, a refined longsword, a sharp dagger and a foot-long spearhead that glinted coldly. The chest was filled with a complete set of weapons and armor. The moment Krillos took a good look at the chest's contents, he objected immediately. He knew what Koblight was suggesting, providing those equipment to Auguslo to offset his debt of 1.5 million gold fords. That would also help him gain more trust and support, which were integral in his desire for revenge. No, listen to me first, Koblight said with a wave of his hands. This is the reason I've come to discuss the matter directly with you instead of sending someone. He took out the black metal armor and gave the breastplate a gentle caress. Actually, these are the trade union's latest models. We just forged them not long ago, thanks to the tungsten and other metal ores you provided us with. If our forces can switch to these equipment, our fighting power might triple. Normal crossbows and longbows won't be able to deal troops wearing these armor any harm when fired from 100 meters away. As you said, it's true that if these are provided to the emperor, his military might will rise. You mentioned that he was thinking about rebuilding Fearscale back then in your letter to make them at least the Norton's equal instead of being at a disadvantage by the 4 main Norton legions, right? Sometimes, I find myself wondering what the heck goes through this emperor's mind. It's the most peaceful time for his empire, yet he doesn't focus on raising standards of living to recover the empire's vitality, and instead pays attention to useless military reorganization, like reforming the 3 imperial legions. Since that's the case, the trade union doesn't mind giving him a little push from the back. We'll make him waste even more resources and funds on military equipment. The reason I brought the equipment here is for you to present it to the emperor so that he will protect and support the trade route between your guild and our union. We will obtain even more resources from the empire and this will also help wipe away the debt the emperor placed on you. You can tell him that if he can provide the resources, the union will be able to fashion 50,000 such sets of equipment on a yearly basis. What? 50,000 sets? Your Grace isn't joking, right? How could the number be so high? Said Krillos with shock. As the one in charge of logistics of the Twinhead Merchant Guild forces, he understood how much manpower it took for one set of equipment to be produced. It was no easy affair. If we have enough materials, making 100,000 a year is incredibly easy, Koblight said, we now finally understand how the high-quality equipment of the Nortons were made. Back then, when our blade masters discovered the designs of the water-powered machines in the Northlands, we started researching and further developing them. Now, we have lots of such machines which can be used to replace humans in the forging process. Come to think of it, the forging process is basically a set of repetitive, simpler steps. An experienced forger or smith can only fashion 2 or 3 spearheads a day, or small parts required for 2 sets of armor. But with water-powered machines, we can produce hundreds to thousands of spearheads and around 200 sets of armor in a day. I want you to present this set of equipment to the Emperor and negotiate with him on how we can get more mineral resources from them. For instance, if you're able to gain permission to build a refinery, you can decrease the cost of transporting metals. At the same time, you can provide us with even more material to work with, since transporting ingots is much more worth it than unprocessed ores. If our plan works out, we can even ask for double the amount of resources we actually require. You might not know this, but, if we can get the metals for free, it would cost us only around 8 gold fords for the production of a single set of equipment, mostly to pay for the assembly and the transportation. Each set can then be sold for around 50 gold fords on the market. But Your Grace, the Christian Empire is our Union's arch-rival. Would the strengthening of their military affect our revival in the future? If we go to war with them in a few years' time, then the equipment we provided them will prove harmful to us," said Krillos. Koblight took a long sigh. "Krillos, you're mistaken. Currently, war no longer depends on blades and spears. If we fight a war with the Nortons, even if our troops' courage and skill aren't inferior to theirs, they won't give us a chance to fight up close. Instead, they'll use all sorts of ranged weaponry to defeat us from afar. We failed at the Battle of Bluewick and lost Moronti and Folic Plains for good. I've dreamed about that battle countless number of times. That wasn't a war, but a nightmarish massacre. Even though we took all sorts of preventive measures and prepared ourselves against the Nortons' catapults and Caraballisti and finally approached the lines of our enemy and were just about to pay a steep price to take out their troops, they brought out their bronze cannons and flattened our ranks completely. Corpses piled like mountains, blood flowed in rivers. Our soldiers were defenselessly slaughtered. The troops rushing at the forefront back then wore this exact same black metal armor fashioned by Wesha. The one here in my hand. But these things didn't do much to protect them either. The troops were still completely obliterated from the cannon fire. So, tell me. Do you think this set of armor will be the key to the revival of our Union?" Krillos was struck with sudden realization. Both in the Battle of Bluewick and the following Norton attacks on the Union, the bronze cannons played a pivotal part in their victory. Even though the Union used sandbags to temporarily stop the cannon attacks, that didn't change that they were still taking blows on the defensive. They weren't able to launch a counterattack at all. Currently, we are also researching ranged weaponry, such as the Norton Caraballisti and catapults. We are also prepared to obtain the secret of gunpowder from the Dwarven Kingdom in Titanini Mountains to make our own cannons. But that will require lots of time and resources. That is why the trade route is integral for us. Krillos, I know why you've gone to the imperial capital, but I must beg you to suppress your desire for revenge. Please temporarily get along with your nemesis for the sake of our grand ambition. Use the trust you've gained to help us on the path of victory. As long as this trade route can continue to supply us with resources, the day of our comeback will arrive soon." Koblight bowed deeply to Krillos, as if he was expressing his sincerest apologies for having to request something like this of him. Krillos hurriedly helped the man up and held him by the shoulders. "Your Grace doesn't need to do this. I know what I have to do. Actually, even though I can meet that person now, I have no way of exacting revenge. Not only is he a blade master, he's also the Emperor. I have no way of doing anything to him. As for the trade route, I will do anything that will benefit our Union even if your Grace doesn't tell me to. What I'm worried about now is House Norton. In their attempt to crush Andlu, they've doubled the purchasing price for raw materials and we have no way of dealing with it. It harms both sides, but they can afford to keep it this way. My guild on the other hand has been completely disrupted as a result. The more we purchase, the bigger our losses. Otherwise, the 1.5 million gold forts that person wants from me won't be a concern in the first place, said Krillos hatefully. No worries, Koblight consoled, since House Norton wants a trade war, we'll fight them to the end. While we're not a match to them on the battlefield, can we really defeat merchants like us when it comes to trade? We can use the armor here to deal with your debt first and extract even more benefits from the Emperor. Each set of armor like that won't cost more than 20 gold forts including materials and manpower to produce, but we'll be able to sell them to the Emperor for 40 or 30 gold forts. We can even request him to provide us with the materials for free. We'll definitely earn quite a bit on that front. What you have to do for now is to refine the goods first. That way, you can transport more in bulk and save on transportation costs. Additionally, the reason the Nortons formed the market at Jilin Harbor is to buy raw materials as well as sell the goods they produce. Since they've engaged you in a trade war, why don't you start operating the trading point at Floater Creek as a? Even though our union isn't what it used to be, we still have some vigor remaining. Now that we have the resources we need, the technicians and artisans of our guilds can finally put their talents to practice. Perhaps we aren't able to make products good enough to compete with the Nortons in the markets they occupy. However, when it comes to gold and silverware, wine, stone sculptures and art pieces, we are superior. If we can find a market for those in the Empire, it would be a good income stream for us. As expected of the president of Twin-Head Dragon, Koblight was able to give a few good business proposals to Krillos in the blink of an eye. Krillos looked more excited the more he heard. That's right, I've only been focusing on how I can provide you with resources, but I forgot that I could buy products from you to sell too. Setting up a luxury goods market at Floater Creek is a good idea. I'm sure the imperial nobles would love to buy expensive luxury items there to inflate their social status and cultured sense. The two of them laughed heartily. The war was over and peace had come. The imperial nobles no longer strove for courage and started to pay attention to arts and culture. That was the case with the nobles across the mid-southern nations as well. All of a sudden, the trend of odd-looking sculptures and colorful paintings which nobody could really make sense of saw a growing trend among the nobles and were at the height of their popularity. The two men believed that if the artisans of the Union could make some to cater to the imperial nobles, those products would be warmly received as well. All right, Your Grace. I'll do what you say and present this set of exquisite armor to that fellow and try to get some benefits for our Union, Krillos said after a long sigh, but I still feel unwilling to hand such good quality equipment to our enemy. Koblight chuckled. Krillos, did you know that in the forests of our province of Lealika, there's a kind of bird called the bulga? These birds don't hatch their own eggs. Instead, they'll steal eggs of other birds from their nests and place their own within so others can do the laying for it. What we are trying to do is not so different from the strategy of the bulgas. If we use these equipment for ourselves, we'll once more catch the attention of the other mid-southern nations and get sanctioned by them. That wouldn't only cause the hard-achieved peace to crumble, we would also suffer the pushback from those nations in their markets. Let the warmonger emperor get his hands on these equipment. That way, he'd definitely form a new legion. The more we provide, the more he will form. Perhaps only through that can he feel safe and secure against the Sword Saint Duke of the Northlands. What this emperor doesn't understand is that his military expansion during a time of peace that follows right after a war will only cause the other nations to worry. The empire will become a target to be observed and alert against. That will make it easier for our union to move in the shadows. We might even be able to reform the century-long alliance that held against the empire back then too. And you, Krillos, only have to try to gain this emperor's trust. Work hard to try to make his frivolous illegitimate son the heir to the throne. If he can get the commanding rights to a legion, that'd be even better. I will be sending you lots of helpers, which you can place into that legion to control it. That way, we can cause another period of chaos within the empire with a power struggle just like our fathers did back then. Krillos nodded emotionally. I understand, Your Grace. I shall do as you say. Chapter 588 Trade War. Freelide limped into the study and reported with a gloomy tone, Your Grace, Duke Kenmaze has arrived at Palace Ursa Rex. My father, I mean, Baron Charade has gone to receive him. Lorist closed the book in his hand and looked at the boy quietly. Were you taught a lesson by your father again? No. Freelide refused to admit. Then what's with the large boot mark on your pants? Apart from me and your father, I doubt anybody else would dare to do that to you. Tell me what you did this time to earn your father's wrath. Lorist could tell from how Freelide looked that he had obviously been harshly beaten by Charade. Well, Your Grace. Young Master Enderbale and I were just coloring the smaller bear sculptures grey-white and we pushed them to the middle of a pavement. My father didn't pay attention to it and tripped badly, so he was really mad, conceded Freelide. Pfft. Lorist stifled his laughter with his hands. Charade's second son had a really easygoing personality. He wasn't as serious as Reedy, as studious as Howard, nor as reliable as Genalio. He was nothing more than a curious child that was slightly hyperactive and wanted to try everything out once. Perhaps it was thanks to being spoiled by Englich, Charade's father-in-law, since a young age, that he became a child so fearless. The academy head of Nico Academy, Telesty, mentioned that though his innate personality was kind, his curiosity was far too heavy. He was also said to be filled with courage and was the biggest troublemaker in school, making him the biggest threat the instructors had to watch out for. That was why when they heard that Freelide was going to be made attendant of Lorist, the instructors of Nico Academy cheered with glee, though, they were quite disappointed that their colleagues at Dawn Academy wouldn't have to suffer the pain they did. When he first came to Lorist's side, he felt a little timid, given that he was in a new place and Reedy and Genalio were there. Even though he was only 16, he had already awakened his Batla force. And given his bright personality and tough build, Reedy and Genalio liked him quite a lot and would often give him pointers on what to look out for as Lorist's attendant. But since returning to Palace Ursa Rex, Reedy brought Genalio to Firm Rock to further train in the Dan Ocean key refining technique, so Freelide was free to roam without supervision. Lorist wouldn't be paying attention to his every move anyway, so he went all out. And somehow, he got along well with Enderbale the moment they met and played together all the time, causing much chaos and unrest at the palace. And then began Freelide's tragedy. As House Norton's chief minister, Charade would often seek Lorist out to discuss matters when he returned to the palace. Freelide's actions didn't escape his notice, and though Lorist wasn't too willing to go all out to educate Freelide, Charade didn't hold such reservations. His punishment was the harshest it could get. Nowadays, Freelide would always act like a timid mouse whenever he saw his father. Enderbale ran away first, right? Asked Lorist. Lorist suspected the reason his son always had so much fun with Freelide was because there was always someone there to bear the consequences. Even though Freelide's so largely built, he didn't really have good observation, so who else but him to take the blame when there was trouble? That was probably what Enderbale was thinking. Yes. Young Master is. Freelide failed to come up with a reason to speak on Enderbale's behalf. The moment Charade tripped, Enderbale had run away immediately, but Freelide stopped to help his father up, only to get a beating in return. Lorist pulled on the bell rope beside the wall and Pat, the leader of the guards, soon arrived. Go and fetch Enderbale and bring this fellow to the yard. Have the both of them stand in the horse stance for half an hour. Don't forget to put a bowl of water on each of their shoulders and ask them to do it over if the water tips over. Give Enderbale 3 canes to the rear as well and tell him that he should take the blame with his comrades if he did something wrong instead of escaping alone, instructed Lorist. Understood, Your Grace. Pat took the crestfallen Freelide away with him. Moments later, Charade came to Lorist accompanied by Kenmaze. Given how unkempt Charade's clothes were and the slight red flush on his face, it could be seen how mad he was to be tripped by his child's antics. But what piqued Lorist's curiosity was Ken May's instead. He brought a few large boxes into the study and instructed the servants to arrange them properly before asking them to leave. Only after that did he breathe a sigh of relief. "Aha, my brother, you are far too generous, for you to bring me so many gifts," said Lorist intentionally. He knew that those were probably not gifts. Dukes like them usually brought each other a list of the gifts instead of bringing the boxes straight to the other person like a savage. "In your dreams," Ken Mays retorted, "there aren't gifts. Locke, I've decided to go to Floater Creek and the boxes here contain the competing products of your enemy, Andlu. I brought them here for you to expand your horizons. Also, I heard that our Emperor has ordered Floater Creek to be rented to Andlu. A market will soon be built there. It's obvious that they're trying to compete with Jilin Harbor, which your house technically owns. Be it place or accessibility, Floater Creek holds the advantage. Given that they have the Emperor's support, don't you worry that the market at Jilin Harbor will suffer." Lorist smiled and shook his head. "I don't have to worry about this. Even though the trading point at Floater Creek took up quite a bit of our sales volume, only raw materials and mineral ores are affected. On that front, but of us are taking huge losses to the benefit of the landed nobles that have these resources. But when the nobles gain more money, it'll benefit the market as they'll increase their purchases of other products. And we're trying to start a market there is only them trying to get a piece of the pie. As for the nobles, they will still consider quality and price before they make their purchases." Lorist was quite confident on that front. House Norton produced lots of products of varying types and also enjoyed the benefit of maritime transportation. Lorist believed that Andlu, who still relied on importing products from the trade union through land, wouldn't be able to compete with House Norton in terms of quality and cost. "You're too confident, Locke," Ken Mays said with a shake of his head. "Andlu isn't going to fight your house in the market of daily necessities. They chose to compete in high fashion and luxury goods." Ken Mays walked to the side of one box and opened it, bringing out an intricate-looking golden bowl, a golden plate, goblet, and so on. Soon, Lorist's desk was filled with golden dinery. "Each set of 40 to 50 golden dinery cost me 70,000 gold fords," boasted Ken Mays gleefully. "Are you crazy?" Charade jumped with shock and exclaimed, "Give me 20,000 and I'll have someone make the exact same ones for you." "Fool!" snorted Ken Mays. He held a golden plate up and ran his finger across the intricate engravings. "Look at these engravings and the brand on the bottom of the plate. See who made this set before you say something as stupid as making them for me at the cost of 20,000. These are no ordinary dining ware. I'm not just a rich fool, you know." Lorist took a bowl and turned it over, only to see a rhombus-shaped signature which read Blueway. "Blueway? This name sounds familiar," said Charade as he looked at the back of the plate he held. "Hee, do you remember the Duchy of Zictor?" asked Ken Mays. "What does this have to do with Zictor?" Lorist turned the bowl in his hand around and didn't see anything that suggested any affiliation with the duchy. Charade on the other hand widened his eyes with realization. "You mean the duchy famed for making gold and silverware? Weren't they eliminated by the trade union during the war in the mid-southern area? I think Mayflower's kingdom is founded on the territory that used to belong to Zictor. The Zictor we helped found again in the neighboring province of the trade union is headed only by the Duke's nephew. He inherited the position of the current Duke of Zictor. The duchy you helped revive is completely different from the old one," Ken Mays said without holding back. "Back then, Zictor was famous for their gold and silverware. Blueway represents the most elite smithing family of the duchy. They produce less than 10 such sets and the demand for their work is always through the roof. For the past 2 centuries, having a set of Blueway-made dining ware is something worth bragging about for a noble house. What I didn't think was that the trade union would manage to take the Blueway family for themselves after exterminating the duchy and gain control of their production line. They are no different from a tree that grows money. Locke, the glass dining ware produced by House Norton is indeed refined and intricate. But compared to those produced by the trade union's Blueway family, it still falls short. I believe that most imperial nobles will think the same as me and will be willing to buy a set of Blueway dining ware to be passed down through their family. Lorist's expression turned serious. Ken Mays was right. Even though the Dominion produced lots of different products and occupied most of the market for daily necessities on the continent, those were made for the common consumer. They weren't trendy or luxurious items. The trade union had chosen to use history and branding as their weapons against House Norton and made a good move. House Norton only started to rise after Lorist returned to the Northlands after all. Even though the house had a history of 3 centuries, they had been a rather mediocre noble house at the Empire's northern border during that time and didn't expend any effort on anything other than surviving. What else are in those boxes? Take them all out, said Lorist. There were luxurious and expensive rugs, fine branded wine of the Petrin Duchy, intricate jewelry from the Kingdom of Abaton, as well as many famous branded products from nations wiped out by the trade union. Lastly, Ken Mays brought out an odd-looking sculpture. What is this? Asked Lorist curiously. It depicted a voluptuous woman and a lanky man entangled together in a weird pose, giving others an uncomfortable vibe. Hee, this is the magnum opus of the famous artist from 5 centuries ago, Carmen Sitoff. Well, a replica of it anyway. I spent 50,000 gold forts to get my hand on this. Just look at how natural the curves on this is. This completely shows that women embody the essence of victors instead of men, said Ken Mays with a sudden hipster-like expression. Doesn't this just mean that women can go on all night while men tire out first? Lorist didn't know how to react at the sight of Ken Mays caressing the sculpture of a man and woman so lovingly. All right, nobody will take your precious thing from you. Only a guy like you fancies these things anyway. Spending 50,000 gold forts on a thing like this, do you have too much money or something? Locke, you simply don't get it. This is art, said Ken Mays, dissatisfied that Lorist was treating his treasure like a toy. Your Grace. Charade spoke when he looked at the study that was piled up with products. Lorist knew what he was going to say and shook his head with a smile. No worries. Andlu's products won't have a huge effect on our own in Jilin Harbor. Perhaps there will be short-term effects, but in the long term, it shouldn't matter. We provide daily necessities after all while they sell luxury goods which fetch high prices but has low overall demand. Aren't you worried that His Imperial Majesty would use this chance to put pressure on the market at Jilin Harbor? He might use this as an excuse to reclaim the rights to that place, said Ken Mays. Relax, he won't dare to do it, Lorist said confidently. Even though our emperor thinks himself smart to provide raw materials and mineral ores for Andlu and cancelled the business deal he has with our house, he still requires the cash from the food grown throughout the empire which is sold at Jilin Harbor to keep the empire functioning. He wouldn't touch Jilin Harbor before Andlu is able to provide him with a steady income stream. Ken Mays breathed a sigh of relief. I can rest assured with what you just said. You should know that our Salt Merchant Committee is the largest trading company in the empire and the competition between your house and Andlu allowed us to earn 30% more profit this year. Our fleets are doing our best to purchase the raw materials and ores from the nobles to resell them at Jilin Harbor or Floater Creek. As long as you keep this up, I'm going to expand the scale of the purchases of the committee next year. The prices shouldn't change much, Lorist said. We're in a hard position to step down from. Let's see who caves in first. In fact, I would rather you sell your goods at Floater Creek to drain away the cash flow of Andlu. Ken Mays nodded and said, Understood. Chapter 589 Lack of Manpower. One more chapter left before the very last chapter. What would you read after that? Fear not, for we have started translating the new work from TRL's author, Black Iron's Glory. Click here to give it a read. Charade rushed into Lorist's study with a thick stack of documents. It had been a month since Duke Ken Mays's visit and it was currently the 11th month of the year 1786. In the office next to the study, Charade looked at his son happily. Freelide was going through a bunch of official documents with a gloomy expression. Charade cleared his throat and waited for Freelide to look up before he said, "Make an announcement that I've come to seek an audience with His Grace." Freelide's eyebrows lazily rose. "Father, just go in. His Grace said this morning that there wasn't a need to announce you." Charade flipped out. "Darned kid, just make the announcement if I ask you to. His Grace is just being nice, but we subordinates have to always observe protocol, understood? Go, quick." Freelide rose from his desk as he muttered, "This is so unnecessary. People like you who go about rules all the time just love to trouble other people." Soon, Freelide darted out of the study and said, "Duke Norton invites you in." Lorist wasn't alone in the study. The head of intelligence of the house, Tarkle, was standing beside the desk. "You're here. Well, take a look at these reports from the imperial capital first," said Lorist when he pointed to the documents on the desk. Charade put down the folders in his hand and read out one of the reports. His Imperial Majesty announced the reformation of Fierce Gale Sand Legion with a full 45,000 men and will be stationing them in Malivia. It has so far been confirmed that the trade union will be supplying the Legion's equipment through Andlo by selling each set at 30 gold forts, but the materials have to be provided as well. Currently, His Imperial Majesty hasn't paid a single coin for it and Andlo is bearing the cost for it. According to our informants in the palace, His Imperial Majesty ordered 100,000 such sets of equipment. Is His Imperial Majesty insane? It wasn't surprising for Charade to have such suspicions. What was Auguslo thinking? Even though the trade union was the Chrisan Empire's nemesis, Auguslo made an order for 100,000 sets of equipment from them. It wasn't a small order, and even at 30 gold forts per set would amount to 3 million for 100,000 sets, not to mention the need to provide materials as well. "What can you tell from this?" asked Lorist. "I think the Emperor is losing his marbles. It's a time of peace, yet he's trying to expand his military and tossing more money into this endless void. He's spending 3 million gold forts plus materials for 100,000 sets of equipment. Did he forget how the trade union is our biggest enemy? He's giving them a helping hand. Not to mention, Fierce Gale was involved in that scandal back then. Does he think that adding sand to the name would make it a new legion? Stationing Fierce Gale Sand at Malivia is him trying to replace Wit Elian, right? Does His Imperial Majesty want to let Wit Elian deal with bandit threats from now on and use Fierce Gale Sand against outside threats?" questioned Charade. "Read these reports as well. Andlo built a rather large refinery as well as a forgery near Floater and pre-processes the raw materials so that the transportation costs are lowered and their efficiency heightened. They also footed the bill of 3 million gold forts for the 100,000 sets of armor. These 3 million gold forts is said to be forced on Andlo by our Emperor. As we increased the purchasing price, His Imperial Majesty lost 1 million gold forts this year and the previous year, so the losses were blamed on Andlo. As for the additional 1 million, that is the investment the Emperor made in the guild, which actually only amounts to around 800,000 gold forts. But he demanded for to be given a return for 500,000 gold forts. What a great deal he got!" Lorist wore a mocking smile on his face. "I really applaud the talent this Selic of Andlo has. Not only did he manage to resist our high prices, he also managed to develop Andlo to this scale despite the Emperor's greed. He truly is someone capable. I thought that our heightened purchasing prices will help stifle Andlo's cash flow and increase the costs of their transportation. After that, we can force His Imperial Majesty to blame his losses on Andlo and thereby restricting the trade with the trade union or cutting it off entirely. I didn't think they'd satisfy His Imperial Majesty's greed with quality equipment and manage to use trade with the Union to make up for their losses. I have to admit that our price hike strategy has lost its effect. Our Emperor already gave Andlo the mining and managing rights of all 7 mines in 3 provinces for the making of the 100,000 sets of equipment. Back then, Andlo only had the rights to sell, so they weren't able to keep up with the Nortons in terms of purchasing price. But now, Auguslo gave the mining rights to Andlu, effectively ridding them of the need to buy the ores from anyone else. If allowed to continue, Andlu would definitely develop into a trade giant that could even influence the empire's policies. That should have been something a wise ruler would watch out for. Your Grace, how would we deal with this matter? Asked Charade with a furrowed brow. Deal? There's no way, Lorist said while shaking his head, we don't have a say over the Emperor's decision. How he wants to run his empire is his decision to make. As long as they don't directly cross our house's interests, we can do naught but watch from the sidelines. In fact, in the next few years, our house won't have any effort to spare on caring about other matters. We have no choice but to endure even if it means taking some loss. Currently, we have all our resources and manpower focused on Malak defense line in Montside. That is something that'll set our course for the next century to come. As long as it is complete, we will be rid of barbarian and magic beast attacks. Montside will be our backyard where our subjects can live their lives in peace and thrive. It'll become a firm power base for us in our expansion to the wildlands in the future. Lorist pointed at the reports on the desk. Actually, these reports don't just tell us about the affair between His Imperial Majesty and Andlu and their deals. If we look deeper, we can find out about even more secrets, such as what you guys think the 100,000 sets of equipment imply. Charade's expression changed immediately. 2 years to produce 100,000 sets. Your Grace, that means that the trade union is most possibly using our water-powered machines. It won't be possible for them to finish the order within 2 years with manpower alone, and sell them at such a low price to boot. That's right, Lorist nodded and said, this means that the trade union is recovering quickly. That's why they were able to research and implement these machines. Currently, our empire and the trade union have close ties with Andlu, so our arrangements against the trade union have been rendered useless. For instance, the exclusive salt deal Peterson carried out is for naught. They definitely wouldn't dare to stop Andlu from bringing in rock salt in large amounts. His Imperial Majesty is also going to station fierce gale sand in Malivia, obviously threatening Peterson to not interfere with future trade with the. Your Grace, do you think that the trade union will start to trouble the kingdom of Peterson in the next few years? Asked Charade. There's that possibility. The trade union has to first establish a route to the Folic Plains if it is to come back in full force. It has to reclaim Moronti and Folic Plains, and Peterson is the first obstacle they have to overcome. But given the current situation, I doubt that the trade union will do something so irrational. If they become the ones to instigate conflict, they'll definitely become an eyesore for the neighboring nations. After all, the flames of war just stopped burning for a few short years. The nations are still on alert, said Lorist as he mulled over the maps on the wall. Tarkal, increase the scale of observation on the trade union. Send word immediately if any military reorganization is being taken. Understood, Your Grace. Your Grace, it's too bad we're located too far away from Peterson and Folic Plains. We won't be able to do much if something changes there, bemoaned Charade. Hee, no worries. Don't forget we have a piece of rented land in Moronti. As long as we can help defend Moronti, it's fine if we lose Folic Plains. Sometimes, I really find myself wishing that the trade union will launch the first strike. That way, we would have a reason to exterminate them completely with our forces to rid ourselves of this worry. Sigh, it's too bad that we won't have this chance anymore. If Lorist hadn't cared about the casualties of his troops back then, he wouldn't be troubled over such matters now. The trade union was a restless cockroach that just won't die and would be revitalized with just a bit of sunlight. Given that they were now working with Auguslo as allies thanks to Andlu's mediation, the trade between them was growing larger and even affected House Norton's position in the empire. Lorist wasn't able to come up with a solution to deal with it immediately either, since a trade dispute couldn't just be settled with force. If he suppressed others with his status as Sword Saint, it'd only earn him the derisive laughter of others. Tarkal arranged the reports before respectfully taking his leave. Lorist opened a bottle of blackcurrant wine and poured Charade and himself a cup each. Charade opened the thick folders he brought as he drank from his cup. "Your Grace, here is a report from Camorra." He said that His Imperial Majesty released a public notice in hopes that Jilin Harbour will be able to increase the purchase of food, at least double the amount this year. Lorist shook his head. "Our Emperor is going desperate from the lack of money. Most of Jilin Harbour's purchases are transported to Moronti to be sold there, and His Imperial Majesty gets around 1 million gold fords from this. Write him a letter to say that Moronti's market is only so big and they only require so much. Selling even more food there will only cause the price to fall and won't earn much profit anyways. Refuse his request." Charade nodded. Grandmaster Siroba sent word from Montside that he isn't confident that this year's target for Malak defense line won't be hit. The original plan states that we should be able to complete 50 kilometers of the line this year, but only around 30 is complete so far. A large reason behind that is the lack of manpower. We need more young laborers. Lorist furrowed his brow. That was a huge problem the house currently faced. Perhaps life in the Dominion was too good that not many folks of the Northlands were willing to leave their homes to go to a desolate province like Montside to work. They were already able to find a well-paying job in the Northlands, so House Norton's original plan to recruit 100,000 youth laborers for the project didn't go through as well. Currently, we only have 40,000 workers there, 30,000 of whom are fierce-scale captives. They were punished for 5 years of labor and around 1,000 die each year. Mainly, it's due to falling to plagues or mountain barbarian attacks. The morale is really low. The other 10,000 are citizens who have taken root in Montside and they understand what Malak defense line means to the province, so a group of them want to help out. It's too bad that their numbers are too low, summarized Charade. Lorist rapped on the table and asked, "Does Malak and the others have any suggestions on what to do about the lack of manpower?" Lord Potterfang suggested for us to increase the pay for laborers since anyone well paid enough can do a job well. He thinks that if we increase the payment by a few times, we'll easily be able to recruit enough workers from the Dominion to work on the project. However, Spiel shot down that idea as he thinks that we can't increase the budget of the project. Being able to pay for the security of the project is already the best the house can do. Lord Malak on the other hand suggested for the various garrison forces in the various provinces there to make up for the lack. However, Lord Hector suggested that with the 3 main legions stationed there, the garrison forces shouldn't be used as laborers as we won't have adequate defenses should an urgent situation arise. Charade continued to read through the folders, reading the suggestions and objections of the other officials of the house. When he reached the last page, he stopped and laughed. "Your Grace, Fierce Tiger Lowe's brought up a really interesting suggestion. He says that we can work with Witelian to clear out the bandits and using the captive bandits as laborers. That way, we won't have to go through the trouble of recruiting laborers." Whoa! That's something I didn't expect from him. "A good idea for once," Lorist said with a chuckle. "Are there any other suggestions?" "Yes," Charade replied, "the head of the Internal Affairs Department, Lord Criston said that we could forcefully conscript our subjects to solve this problem. Serving the Dominion Lord is their duty anyway, but we just haven't ever used this method before. Forcefully conscripting subjects was the right of all Dominion Lords. They could decide how much time a subject has to serve them for free. Some more benevolent lords only made them work a month and provided free food and drink, while some more stingy ones would have their subjects serve year-long without food. However, that would cause the rate of escape to soar. Noble houses that didn't use their right to conscript subjects like the Nortons weren't uncommon either." Lorist contemplated in silence. After a while, he shook his head and said, "We can't forcefully conscript our subjects. That will hurt their trust and loyalty to our house and also displease those within our dominion. Since our predecessors have never employed such a right, we won't establish this precedent either. Let's think of other methods first." "All right, Your Grace. Actually, I think Loza's suggestion is rather practical. Chapter 590 Celebration and Budgets. We've done it. All 590 chapters of Trail have been completely translated Indiana little more than 2 years. The project started back in July of 2016. The journey was arduous and humbling, but ultimately rewarding. It allowed me to share a story I enjoyed with thousands of you. But it seemed like there's so much story left. Lorist's not king yet, some of you may shout. You Discord frequenters will know, however, that the author was forbidden from continuing with the story because of new censorship regulations. So, what's next? Fortunately, Smoke is a Path, TRL's author, returned with his new project, Black Iron's Glory, Big, and has been updating at a stable rate since. We decided to pick it up to continue to bring this beloved author's work to you. We're releasing 7 big chapters weekly, and there'll also be more early access chapters for our Patreon tiers to give the story a splendid kickoff. Thank you for your patronage and pray for your continued support. Ryogawa out. P.S. There's an event held on the r/novel translations subreddit where short speculative endings to TRL are proposed. Shout out to you/Mataz for hosting this as a send-off to the project. Go check it out on this link here. Krillos got off his carriage and slowly made his way into the palace. The guards who saw him on the way saluted him respectfully. Within 3 short years, the crippled man with 2 glaring scars on his face had put the finances of the empire into order. Not only did he help the emperor form 3 new legions, he also increased standards of living for the people, birthed new industries, and reinvigorated the empire's economy, allowing the emperor and the empress to finally host some activities in the palace. Respectful greetings, Count Selleck, greeted the Minister of the Interior, Henry, with a deep bow. His Imperial Majesty is having tea in the garden with Her Imperial Majesty. As it is the young prince's birthday today, the Empress is preparing to host a celebration. His Imperial Majesty has summoned you to ask for some funds for the celebration. Henry revealed the reason Krillos was summoned without hiding anything. Krillos smiled at him and nodded. Thank you, Sir Henry. I recall that your wife mentioned that it would be your 30th marriage anniversary next month. I happened to get my hands on a bottle of Forest Mondieu, also known as the perfume of fairies. I believe this is a fitting gift for your anniversary. Henry looked rather happy to hear that. Forest Mondieu was a famous perfume on the continent, and only few bottles were produced each year, with each costing more than 10 gold fords. He believed that his wife would be able to show off to the other female party-goers with perfume like that and wouldn't come to pester him for the time being. Thank you, Lord Count. I am humbled and grateful to receive such a gift. It was quite laughable when one thought about it. Krillos currently served 3 roles. The first was as the mastermind behind Andlo to develop it into the largest trading guild in the empire. The second was his position as the finance minister of the empire, which was forced upon him by Auguslo. He was in charge of the empire's spending. The third position was that of the sponsor of the imperial treasury. In other words, he was the emperor's personal wallet, a thankless effort, really. To make sure Krillos served him faithfully, Auguslo generously gave him the title of an honorary count and said that as long as he could serve the empire for a decade, he would be made a landed count. Perhaps Auguslo believed that the son of a merchant who was exiled from his nation couldn't be any better. Auguslo, with his great judge of talent, didn't mind his status and crippled body and made him the finance minister straight away. Naturally, Selleck didn't let his hopes down the slightest. He used 3 years to turn around the horrible financial situation of the empire to the point that Auguslo was in a mood good enough to celebrate his son's 7th birthday. Krillos didn't like being called to the empire's central of administration, the palace. He preferred to work in his little office at Andlo where he felt his most free. But he didn't have a choice. The one who always summoned him was the emperor himself, his arch-nemesis. He had to suppress his desire for revenge to meet the emperor and handle him. Auguslo had long forgotten about the liar Marquis Krillos who used to serve as the Union's envoy. He was no more than a small figure. But the pain on Krillos's body and his need to ruin his face and hide always reminded him who he was and what his goals were. He was to be sneaky as a poisonous snake, striking fatally only when the opportunity presented itself. After making his way through a few corridors and taking a few turns, he saw a lush and viridian garden basking under the warm glow of the 11th month sun. Some maidservants were playing around on the beautiful grass, tossing sacks of spice at each other, their laughter sounding clear as bells. It was tea time, the most relaxed period for the maidservants of the palace. As if he didn't see the beautiful scene before him, Krillos took out a grey cloth with a lowered head. Hendry hurriedly received it and carefully wrapped it around Krillos's face before tying it at the back of his head. This had to be done because 3 years back when Krillos was summoned to the palace, the scars stretching from his forehead to his chin shocked the maidservants. So, Auguslo allowed Krillos to mask himself when he visited the palace. While others saw it as Auguslo showing benevolence towards a subordinate, Krillos thought it to be an insult. Auguslo just didn't want his face to terrify his wife and the maidservants. "Aha, here comes our finance minister," said Auguslo with a smile and a golden goblet in his hand. He seemed to be in a rather good mood. "My humblest greetings, your Imperial Majesty," greeted Krillos expressionlessly, before he bowed formally to the Empress. Per noble etiquette, the Queen should reach her hand out for Krillos to kiss. However, she only bowed slightly before hurriedly making her way to a corner of the garden. "My dear Selek, please forgive our Empress's behavior. She has grown up in the great northeastern plains, so the scars on your face would remind her about the ferocious grassland barbarians that often attacked that area. Those wild folk love to trace a knife across their face to show their ferocity after all. When our queen was 6, she hid in a pile of grass and witnessed the barbarians overrun her home and kill her parents right in front of her. That is a nightmare she will never be free from, so she's especially sensitive to your facial scars," apologized Auguslo on the Empress's behalf. "I am sorry for that," Krillos apologized without a change in tone, "but the scars on my face are far from voluntary. Your Imperial Majesty knows about my experiences being on the run. These scars are the ones that convinced my pursuers that I was dead and allowed me to escape with my life. So, I can only apologize if they cause any fright to Her Imperial Majesty." "No worries." Auguslo waved the goblet in his hand, and a maidservant quickly came forward to serve Krillos a silver goblet filled with good wine. "We had you come to the palace to discuss Helist's 7th birthday, which is coming in another 3 months. We plan to hold a birthday celebration for him after our grand New Year's celebration and all nobles are invited to attend. The Empress and us would like to hear your thoughts on the budget of these 2 activities. Naturally, when permissible, we hope that the ceremony can be as grand as possible." Krillos was speechless. What's the point of making such a big deal about it? Prince Helist's birthday is on the 7th day of the 3rd month and there's more than 3 months remaining. There's no need to start planning for it now. But after some thought, Krillos remembered that it was the rainy season during the 3rd month, which made it really inconvenient to leave home. Usually, the celebrations on the 1st day of the 1st month would last for more than 10 days. The nobles and their family members couldn't stay in the imperial capital until the rainy season was over, after all. They would usually leave before the ice melted in the 2nd month to their dominions to spend the rest of winter and the rainy season. Auguslo was worried that the nobles would not attend his son's birthday celebration because of the rainy season and that would absolutely embarrass him and his wife. It was all to blame on the bad timing in which Helist was born right before the rainy season. The reason there wasn't any grand celebration in the past was because Auguslo would simply celebrate with his wife and some maidservants in the palace. Perhaps to make up for the simple parties they threw back then, they wanted to host a grand celebration for the prince's 7th birthday and invite all the nobles to attend. The reason Auguslo brought up the New Year's celebration alongside with the prince's birthday was so that he could give the nobles a reason to stay until the 3rd month and attend his son's birthday, making it much merrier. But tending to those nobles and their families wasn't an easy affair. They had to be provided with places to roam and parties to attend so that they wouldn't feel bored waiting through winter and the rainy season. All that naturally cost quite a number of gold coins. Your Imperial Majesty, the financial situation of the Empire is still a little tight. Much money still has to be invested in transportation and civilian development to fix the damage wrought by the war. Even though I wouldn't personally encourage for so much money to be spent on such an event, I recall that Your Imperial Majesty's personal treasury should have enough money to fund such a celebration. Perhaps. Krillos suddenly stopped speaking. He recalled that the reason Auguslo brought up the two events together was because he hoped that the spending of hundreds of thousands of gold fords could be taken from the national treasury instead of the emperor's own wallet, even though personal celebrations like that were usually paid for by the monarch himself. Well, Selek, even though our personal treasury has grown to contain near 1 million gold fords, allowing our family to live a rather prosperous life, I believe such a grand celebration will help boost the nobles and officials' solidarity, so it wouldn't be out of the question to foot that as a public expense, just like the New Year celebrations. What do you say? Auguslo's face didn't blush in the slightest when he said that. Krillos sighed inwardly and bowed. As Your Imperial Majesty wills, I will do my best to gather the funds needed for the prince's birthday celebration. I'll also arrange for appropriate accommodation for the nobles and source more supplies, as well as hire performers from across the land. I will come up with a budget for that within 3 days for Your Imperial Majesty's purview. Auguslo smiled gladly. We know that you won't disappoint us, Selek. We are assured with you in charge. The Empire is at peace now and the people are enjoying a stable life, so a celebration like this is worth it. We have considered whether to announce Helist as our crown prince during the celebration. That will also give the nobles who have waited so long to participate in it a good reason to stay. Krillos's eyes flashed. By the time Auguslo finished speaking his mind about his plans, he lowered his head and said, "This humble servant dares not question Your Imperial Majesty's decision. I shall return swiftly to draft up the budget for the celebration. I will be taking my leave now, as time is of essence." Auguslo laughed dryly, but that was also a part of Krillos which he liked. The finance minister cared not for anything else but finance, which was why he appointed him to the post in the first place. Naturally, his innate talent for such matters was also a huge factor. Auguslo waved him away. "Be on your way then, Selek. We shall be counting on you for this matter." Krillos nodded and bowed before he left with Hendry, the Minister of the Interior. When he left the palace gates and got into his carriage, Krillos looked really excited. He knocked on the wall of the carriage. Soon, the guards asked from outside, "My lord, do you have any instructions?" "Go to Count Wex's and ask him to see me immediately," said Krillos. "Understood, my lord." End of TRL.